Welcome, everybody, to episode 8 of the Big Ben and Friends podcast. I am your host, Big Ben Ortmanns, and this week I'm going to be interviewing one of my buddies from the pro wrestling business. And when I say one of my buddies, I pretty much mean like the first real friend that I ever actually made in pro wrestling outside of my gym. He is... So this is going to be the weird part, is introducing this guy. This guy has, like I said, he was the first real friend I really ever met in pro wrestling. When I got to the Maritimes, I was very lucky to get to tour the Maritimes literally on my second match in, which was like 3 days after my first match. And this guy here took a very, very dumb kid who hadn't quite learned all of his etiquette yet. And basically took me in, man. And I'm not sure why to this day he decided that he wanted to be my buddy, but he was. And we got close real quick, to the point where when I moved down there a few months later after enjoying my first stint, I pretty much lived down the road from New Scott. And on a week-to-week basis, I would head down to his apartment and basically raid and live in his tape closet. And a lot of the wrestling that I've got to learn literally in that 1 year chunk mostly came from this dude's closet. He's been a huge pioneer in the Maritimes as far as just being an advocate goes. Newscott.com was the first really ever, and I don't know if anybody's ever tried to duplicate. Has anybody ever tried to duplicate that for the Maritimes?
No,
probably
not at all, really.
It was the first and only maritime wrestling news site. That's how I got to know about a lot of the guys down there. He started interviewing everybody from across the Maritimes, from across Canada. I was the first ever New Scott interview that he ever did, and did so about like 2 or 3 times, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
He's done more to help maritime wrestling than probably anybody in the last 25 years. I'd say he's probably just as influential in the Maritimes as your Leo Burks, your Duprees, everybody. Because without New Scott, none of you would know who the hell anybody is in that Maritimes today. Those guys come from a lineage that they came from New Scott Video. Essentially, that's where they learned their history from. And it's my pleasure to have one of my oldest friends, one of the most influential men in maritime wrestling history as far as I'm concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my friend, New Scott. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm about to cry. That was probably the greatest introduction. Half of it's not true, but
tell me what part.
Greatest introduction
Go ahead.
Anyone's ever given me.
Tell me what part's not true, and I'll fucking debate you.
The Leo Burke part.
Okay, I said up there with Leo Burke.
Okay.
Because there are influential people in maritime wrestling. Like, you've got your Leo Burks, like your Dupree family. Huge. Obviously, like the Cardinal Sinners, with Bobby Roode, like those 3, because I would throw him in there. You think of maritime wrestling, and you think that there's like just certain people who have had a very, very large influence on the business itself. Like those guys had a hand in, like, there's like Eddie Watts, huge hand in the wrestling down there, but as far as getting the word out, getting people educated on maritime wrestling, making sure people had footage to watch, like, you are the maritime wrestling library, for crying out loud.
That's true.
And that is true. And that's why I have to say that you're as influential as you are. I didn't even mention the fact that not only do you tape all these shows, but you've been a promoter out there. You've hosted the Maritime Cup, which the first one ever was won by Bobby Roode. So there is and to this day, and you got to keep in mind, everybody, that when I first met New Scott, this was back in 2002.
April 2002.
April, for Mainstream Wrestling.
The Totally Taylor road trip.
Yes. Taylor Matheny, now Taylor Kendrick. And this is how cool
Yeah.
New Scott is. He literally still is friends with her to this day. And I don't think that she's ever been on social media,
Yeah.
ever. She's pretty much a unicorn if you ever tried to
Barely.
track her down otherwise. But
Yeah.
everybody's anybody that's ever been associated with the Maritimes who genuinely gives a shit about, pro wrestling and the history, we all love this guy. And
I appreciate that, man. I really do.
well, it's
Means a
true.
lot.
I've been trying to get good at my introductions, but then I realized that the best way to get good at introductions is just be honest. And oddly enough, you can kind of get to know people a lot better just by being honest. Because you know what? Your resume isn't too bad, buddy.
I appreciate that. I've tried. It'll be 18 years this fall since I started getting involved. And literally all I've tried to do is just promote the wrestlers in the Maritimes to get more well known. That was my goal when I started, was to promote my friends, which I still do more than anyone else. But my goal was to get the maritime wrestling scene noticed as far across the world as possible. And that was the only thing I've ever tried to do, was just because we have so many talented people here and nobody knows we exist. We have a couple of guys that would blow, like you could send them to Japan and everyone would be like, holy fuck. Like,
Yeah.
but nobody knows the Maritimes exist, so nobody knows who they are. So my
And
goal was to always try to get these guys noticed as much as possible.
And you've done a phenomenal job with that. And we're going to get into all of that. Like, we're going to break a lot of stuff down. Like I was mentioning to you before we hit the record button, I've typically got like a format and like a sheet of questions that I would typically ask my normal guests. But with you, I'm going to wing this one, man, just because
Yeah.
talking
to
you is
wing
super.
This one, you can't wing any of them.
Correct. First of all, talking to you is very easy. I've known you for a very long time, and there's some really cool things that I think that we're going to be able to break down and talk about. But before we get into any of that, we're going to start by, I always have to ask, I like my buddies to be comfortable. So I've went and got myself, as I was explaining to you, I got myself one of my my final White Claws out of my fridge because I may have went a little too hard in the paint on the weekend, and I've been kind of feeling it ever since, just because I'm old and I don't drink now. So I'm trying to get these out of the way so that way I don't have to look at them. So excuse me if I get drunk. Trying not to. But what do you got in your cup today? What are you drinking?
I got Gatorade G0. No calories, no sugar, nothing.
Going hard
Water
in the
and
paint today.
flavor, baby. That's all I ever drink, really.
Hey, respect for that.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, because this is going to be an interesting question. Well, for me, it's going to be an interesting answer, but I always start these interviews off by asking, because the whole point of these podcasts is to get to know my friends, hence the name Big Ben and Friends Podcast. So I always like to get my guests' first memories of how we met and how we became friends. So I'm going to allow the floor to you. And
well, the first time we ever met, it was April 2002 in East Hants, I believe, at a high school gym was the show on the Totally Taylor road trip. I remember you came down with a bunch of the Camp Martell guys. There was Jerry Martell, Quinton Valentino, Wendy Martell, or no, she was Morgan Storm back then, right? Morgan Storm.
Yes.
I
had to actually split. I had to think about that.
Six. There was a girl named
Bad Dolly.
And there was a girl named Baby Doll.
No, Bad Dolly.
Bad Dolly, yeah. And Flex Falcone. And there was another guy whose name I forget. Bigger guy.
Did Legacy make the trip?
Oh, Legacy too. I forgot about him. And there was still another guy.
The manager, Mr. Iron E.
Yes, that's him. Okay. So that was the first time we ever met, was at that show. I don't remember who you wrestled or much about the show other than Taylor's part in it. But I remember meeting you guys. And it's funny, almost instantly, you group of guys weren't necessarily well liked because everyone thought that you guys had an attitude for coming down here. Not for coming here, but had an attitude while you were here, that because you only had one match, some of you had no matches. So
Totally did.
you thought that you knew so much more than you actually did. But to be fair, like Steen and Scott never had a ton of experience either at that point, but they were like 2 years in.
Oh,
Matches.
I was way out of my wheelhouse on a lot of stuff down there. So
Yeah.
I remember certain things where I'm just like, when I look back at it, I'm just like, they should have beat me up. They should have at least punched me one time, and I'm surprised they didn't. But sorry, go ahead.
No. That's the first memory I have. I remember meeting you. I saw what they were seeing, but you were 18 years old at the time. Like you always give. Were you 18? Yes.
17.
I always 17.
I think I was either 16 or 17.
Okay. I'm like, he's basically a kid. He's out of his home for like the first time on the road. He's wrestling on a tour for the first time ever. It's totally understandable that you don't get it, that like you're saying things when you probably should be silent, but that's how most people learn, right? You're not the only one. Like a ton of people come in and yap, and then they're like, shut the fuck up. And that's how they learn, right?
Yeah.
But that was my first time meeting you. I generally don't, I was really good friends with Steen at the time. And Steen's the one that had like the biggest problem with you, right? But I was
can I be honest with you? I still don't really remember why he hated me so much, but I remember him. Okay, so I think why me and him didn't get along as much as we didn't at the time was because he was probably correct for not liking me. But I also, my mic keeps doing the
falling. Yeah, I didn't notice it that time.
But I also didn't take a shit either, and I probably should have. But he didn't like the fact that I fought him back either. This is all okay. This is all flooding back to me.
That's
okay, yes,
100% it. Like you wouldn't just be like, "Okay, sir, you're right." You were like, "Well, this is the way it is in Ontario."
And I did do that a lot.
Like,
yeah. Oh my God. So I can actually remember a specific story where the first night in, I remember I wrestled some guy named Chuck
Matrix.
Matrix.
Chuck Matrix.
And I remember that specifically because Ashley Six and I were very good friends at the time. And I remember him, for some reason, like he didn't have a match. So they just booked him to come out during my match. And he was doing such random hilarious shit to me. Like he was going up to like different, like he went up to like some girl and like took her fucking lollipop out of her mouth and like was like stealing people's Cokes and like drinking it. And then like it was just like when you look back at it, it was like hilarious. He was popping me during the match. But I also remember my brother was there and because he was going to school out in Acadia.
I did not know that.
So my brother came with a few of his football buddies, and here I am trying to like impress my brother. I'm trying to like impress my friends, like in the back. I'm like, there's like, and I wasn't able to have a good match with that guy at all. Just I was very limited. But I don't even think he was ever trained.
No, that's what I was about to say. He definitely wasn't.
But what I remember about that match was Ash could see that he was like not trained and he was giving me an extra hard time that maybe I should have had in like my third or fourth match or my second match at the time. And Ash came in and gave him like a legit enziguri. Like you could see on the video, like you could see his head do one of those like triple spins before he landed. And I was like, whoa, crazy. Second night in, I wrestled Scott Savage. What was his other name?
Jeremiah Delinquent, JDL.
JDL, that's right. He was JDL at the time, and I just remember like we were going over something, and I corrected a hold. He was like doing something, and I'm like, no. This is how you actually do it, and that's what sticks out to me. Where I'm just like, oh my God, looking back on like if Scott wasn't like the nicest man on earth and like a man of God, he should have fucking drilled me because
Yeah, and realistically, Scott was the only one that was actually trained out of all of them that went to a real school. He went to Florida and was trained by Dory Funk.
that's right, Dory Jr.
So he's the only one that probably knew a little bit of what he was talking about, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, and this is why this is my that first tour was such a really bittersweet experience for me, especially looking back at it, because like it was sweet because I got experience. It got my foot in the door down there because you know, I essentially moved down there, like wasn't too long after that.
No, it's just a couple months.
Yeah, which opened up other excuse me, you know, which opened up other doors for me, and then opened up other doors for me down the, like it's crazy how many doors that actually opened now that I think about it for me. But man, like I look back at that stuff and just think to myself, like my trainers, and with all due respect to them, because like I still keep in touch with Flex Falcone. I think I'm like the only person in wrestling that keeps in touch with Flex Falcone. But and I still keep in touch with Jerry Martel the odd time too.
Yep.
But I don't know what happened to Quinton Valentino, but I will tell you straight up that man was the worst thing that ever happened to my professional wrestling career. It had nothing.
Yeah, he didn't like me either for some reason, and I don't know. Well, I mean, I get why, but he never ever got over it.
Well, I want to explain why. Because and it wasn't just mine; it was the entire squad's. That entire squad's piss poor attitude came from him. It had nothing to do with Jerry Martel. Jerry Martel, back then to this day, probably the nicest human being you'll ever fucking meet in your life.
Yeah,
will give you the shirt off of his back. And to be perfectly honest with you, he was actually a good trainer, man. Like Jerry Martel was a good wrestling trainer. Like he was, I would kind of put it's weird because him and I always connected really well, and I will kind of put myself in like a similar category as him, where I don't think that we were as good of wrestlers as we could have and should have been, because we don't connect with the audience. It has nothing to do with our skill. We just never connected with the audience.
Right.
I have that ability to look back and be honest about it, you know. But we're good wrestling trainers. And I'm not trying to put myself over, but that's kind of what he was. It's like he was he was good. And Flex Falcone, amazing. Like
amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. Like I learned so much about fitness, about life. And he was more of the wrestler that I kind of took to style wise, but like him and Bill, like Jerry, but like, I was friends with those guys, and I'm still friends with those guys, you know. Quinton Valentino, on the other hand, was I will always appreciate the fact that he picked me up and gave me the rides and got me a foot in the door. But as a trainer, garbage, straight fucking garbage. Nobody will ever know the fucking bullshit that we had to go through from that guy. I don't mention him as a trainer for a reason. If people ask me who trained me, I always say I had a brief stint at Camp Martel, which if you want to look at it, Jerry Martel and Flex Falcone are the guys who trained me. Chi-Chi Cruz,
I have those tapes. Camp Martel Championship Wrestling.
Burn them, please.
No, never.
But like I refer to my trainers as Chi-Chi Cruz and Vance Nevada, you know, because like those are the guys who really taught me what wrestling is, and Notorious TID as well. You know, like he's been as much as he is my co-partner, my best buddy, like my brother, like everything. You know, he's been a coach for me the whole time, because you know you never stop learning. And
it's funny because all of those guys you've mentioned have all had long stints out in the Maritimes.
Exactly, and this is why the Maritimes is so important to me. You know, and that's stuff that we'll eventually get into, but. Kind of tying back to the story that we were just talking about, Quinton Valentino had the worst fucking attitude ever. Like everything was like, he basically taught and this is where we kind of got lucky. The trainers at that time, because there was the three of them, there was the two girls, but let's be real, it was the three dudes. They kind of each had their own favorite. Like I was Jerry Martell's favorite. You know, I was his boy. Flex Falcone's cousin, I want to say, was by for a little bit, and he was Flex's project until his cousin quit, and then clearly I became his project, and I was like a joint project of the two.
Right.
But Quinton Valentino's project was Jim Legacy. He taught him how to be a fucking asshole. Like every like as far as etiquette goes, like he taught him basically how to be a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And as I'm looking at all this stuff, I'm like, oh, he's the dominant male in this like trainer coach relationship. So I have to be like that guy. And he demeaned us. Like he would demean everybody. Like he would go out and like stiff people on purpose. Like he just had the worst fucking attitude. And to the point where like when new trainees would come in, he would impose on like the guys who had been around a while, like myself and Jim, to be hard on the new people coming in. Like he basically wanted us to be mini Quinton Valentinos. So in a weird way, that's kind of what we were for like the first little while until I would say that I moved down to the Maritimes. And then once I moved
like
down,
he watched the first season of Tough Enough and wanted to be Taz.
he took that shit to heart. And you know what's funny? That was right at the exact time that was going on.
Yeah, I know.
Wow, that actually makes a lot of sense. But you're not wrong. Wow, that might have been it actually. But he certainly
that season ended right before you guys came out, because that's why Taylor came here.
Yeah, and I remember even going to WrestleMania because it was in Toronto, and she,
I got that tape too.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
The Ultimate Warrior with Michael Cole.
Can you please put that up on YouTube?
I'll try. Yeah.
Okay, for anybody. Okay, so I want to preface this, by the way. So I went to the Access at WrestleMania that year, and I went with a friend who shall remain nameless. But me and a buddy of mine went, and there was this option to do commentary, and it was either Coach or Michael Cole.
Michael Cole.
So I got Michael Cole, and the funny thing is the one memory that sticks out is I remember asking him, and the best part is they just started recording at that point, and it's on the tape. I asked Michael Cole if he could refer to me as Sean Morgan because that was my wrestling name.
Yeah,
and he's like, I think he even says, he's like, I don't give a shit. I'll call you whatever the fuck you want, kid. Like he was just baffled. But yeah, I actually called the highlights. It was probably like a 4-minute highlight reel of Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan with Michael Cole, and they ended up giving me a fucking VHS tape. And New Scott probably has all of the VHS tapes that I owned as a kid. Do you?
I do. Oh yeah, I have. Well, there was a box at Jerry's place after you left, and he gave me the box.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, that's how I got the Camp Martell stuff. That's how I got the Warrior stuff. I don't remember what else is in it, but those are the two things I remember the most.
Bro, you have my childhood collection of like VHS tapes. Holy shit. I always wondered what happened to that. Like legit,
Oh, yeah.
I was actually wondering what happened to that about a week ago. I am so happy that you have that stuff. Sort of. Because there's some tapes in there that I'd rather not get put out there. Those Camp Martell. So here's why I cringed thinking about that, because when we did an interview for your thing on it was like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
I remember we did something over Skype, I think it was. And when I went back and watched the interview, we were talking about some of the matches that I did, and you had actually taken old clips and put them in. And alls I kept thinking was like, who the fuck let me in a ring at that point in time? Like I was not ready. Like it's crazy to look back as a coach. I'm just like, ugh, like my footwork was garbage. Like my mechanics were garbage. Like who fucking let me do this? Like And who booked me? Like, it was garbage, just garbage. The young kids today have no idea how good they have it, like as far as training
man,
and
it's
expectations, man. Like,
unreal.
because when you go back and look at, like, again, like, I'm only 35 years old, ladies and gentlemen. Like, I'm not that old. And when I first started, Christ, the expectations were clearly low because they let me do this.
Yeah.
Like, just garbage. So the next, I guess, like, one thing I kind of want to get into is because that's all funny to me, and I'm kind of glad that, you know, that validated what my thoughts were, because I was positive I knew I had a ton of heat and stuff like that, and you kind of always heard
so
about
much, man, so much. Even when you came back a few years later, the couple of the guys that were still around were still like, ugh, he's coming back. But by that time, we were really good friends. So I'm like, no, he's a good dude. Just give him a chance. He's changed. He's not a kid anymore.
Well, that was what I was going to ask. It was just like, what,
yeah.
I mean, that's part of the, like, how the hell did we become friends thing? Because, like, what made you even decide to kind of, like, stick by me? Because, like, you were you were vocal for me. Like, you stuck up for me. And like, that's why I will, like, love you to death, man, is like, because, like, you were there for me when you had no fucking reason to, you know? So I've always been curious about that. And I guess it's kind of cool that I get to actually finally ask you after all these years on my podcast, why the hell did you take a chance on me?
Well, it's, I don't know if I'd classify it as taking a chance. I didn't genuinely dislike you like the other people did. I just saw a kid that wanted to become a wrestler, or that was becoming a wrestler, that I liked talking, attitude aside, I liked talking wrestling with you. And you never really gave me that attitude, because I wasn't a wrestler. I wasn't trying to teach you how to wrestle or show you how to do things. So our relationship was a little different than, say, the one you had with Steen or Scott, where they were just wrestling oriented and didn't want to be corrected. If we were talking about a match from WWE or whatever, we just talked about it fine. And then you moved down the street with Jerry Martel, so you were really close. So I would just invite you over. We'd play GameCube. You would take tapes from the closet.
I remember we giggled because you lived in apartment 420.
Yeah.
And that was like RVD. We weren't even potheads at the time. We were just like, RVD. Yeah, it's fucking sweet. We're marks.
Yeah. And and that's all it was. I just saw the other side of you. And I think I may have, like, talked to you about the attitude, about, like, just listen. Even if they're wrong at this point, it's not your place to speak. Because if you're doing it to, like, Steen or Scott, that's one thing. But you eventually got around, like, Cowboy Mike Hughes. And if you were to correct him, you would have been sent packing and never brought back, right? So I was just trying.
He might have been the punch in the face that I needed, but I'm glad that I didn't, because I'm still friends with Mike to this day.
Yeah, Mike's the best. I wouldn't be around here if it wasn't for Mike.
Oh, we're gonna get into that story, because I was there for that confrontation when that all went down
with Peter. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I didn't really. We had a different relationship, and I didn't really have to deal with that attitude. I just saw it. I liked you, and I wanted to correct it. And over time, I think it happened, and we just had a lot of fun together. You moved down the road. You worked for like half a day at the Irving with my ex-girlfriend at the time.
That's right.
And then you just never came back.
That sounds correct.
Yeah. But yeah, we just had a different relationship. I think I didn't.
I thought you were about to bring up the Dairy Queen story.
I was totally going to bring up the Dairy Queen story. I was waiting to the end, though.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, but I didn't really. We just got along. You lived close to me, so I was like, well, let's just hang out, and we just became friends. So then I started going to, like, Steen and Scott. I'm like, he's not a bad guy. He's just a kid with an attitude, and when he grows up, it'll eventually change, and it did for sure.
I genuinely appreciate that, because It's funny because I was actually thinking about this like over the last couple of days, just because I contacted you last week. You all right? You fall down?
Yeah, I fell down.
Hilarious.
Sorry.
No, that's all good, man. I contacted you last week about doing this, so like I kind of had a little bit of time just to think about, just our time together and like just different aspects of our friendship and whatnot. And I've always been appreciative. Jericho the Wonder Dog.
Yeah, she's famous.
Amazing. But no, I've always been appreciative of that fact, like, because I know that you definitely went to bat for me when you didn't need to. So I appreciate the fact that like you took that chance, because you did. You took a chance on me, and you were kind of trying to convince everybody that I wasn't, such a bad guy, or at least that my intentions weren't that bad. But again, kind of tying back to thinking about the last few days, like I remember specifically there was one thing that sticks out in my mind that one of those things when I look back at it, I'm just like, oh, like I was just getting bad advice across the board. Like, because again, like I was just explaining how much I love Jerry Martell, but when we did that first New Scott interview, it was a typed out, like you sent me like this questionnaire thing. And then at the end of it, sort of like how we're going to end this, there's like a rapid fire questions, but yours was just with names. And I just remember there was this guy named Scott. I want to say Scott Phoenix. Was he a guy?
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize, Scott Phoenix, by the way. I wanted to remember your name. I just wasn't 100% sure. I remember his name got brought up in the rapid fire, like questions or whatever. And I remember I was living with Jerry Martell at the time. And specifically, I was on his computer and I was typing all of my answers out. And I didn't know what to say about Scott Phoenix, because I'm just like, I don't know. I don't really remember. Like, I didn't have a good enough impression to kind of be able to say anything. Like, he did his thing in the locker room for the week that I got to be in a locker room with him. And we did ours. Like, it was just, it was what it was. So I looked over at Jerry. I remember looking specifically to my left, and I'm like, is it weird to just say that he like rubbed me the wrong way? He's just like, if that's how you feel, just put that way. Not even realizing what that actually meant. As stupid as that sounds, I was just like, Scott rubbed me the wrong way. Next thing I know, I'm like, I'm getting a shit ton of heat from the boys down there, and I'm like, oh, I guess I can kind of why did I write that? Like, why? and why did he tell me that was okay? Like, because if any of my students ever ask me, like, hey, do you think it'd be a good idea to talk shit about? No, I don't know. Never. It's not a good idea to do that unless you do it to their face and there's something that you plan on doing about it as a man. You know what I mean? But like, I would never recommend that. Like, and horrible fucking advice. So I was just getting it all across the board. And again, I love Jerry, but he gave me real bad advice. And that led to a lot of like issues and stuff like that. And like, the fact that you were able to kind of see past that, definitely appreciate that. Because we ended up doing a lot of car rides together, like you, me, like I was kind of part of that first OG Team New Scott. And
for sure.
For anybody that doesn't know what Team New Scott was like, it's still a thing to this day. Yeah. It's, look at this hat, baby. I've got a toque. I've got my shirt. It's like the members club. You got to have one, but like, even the young Maritime kids are like New Scott, Team New Scott proud, they all got their hats. They all got their gear. Kind of genuinely wonder if they even know what the fuck it even means. But, New Scott kind of just took like this weird cast of crew, and it was myself, Scott Savage, JDL, as we were referring to before, Lincoln Steen, and Sarah. I want to say that was like the first group. Sarah Stock.
But before we met, there was the original three. There was me, Scott Savage, and Lincoln Steen, and then Sarah joined, and then you joined. So that's kind of like the first five. Yeah. Right.
So we kind of rode quite a bit together, which was hilarious because I lived with Jerry Martell, but I would ride with you guys. But one memory that sticks out that I know that you were there for, and in a weird way, I hate telling the story because it's very self-serving, but I mean, it is what it is. When I first moved down there, we became buds pretty quickly. And
Yep.
then I ended up doing a couple of mainstream wrestling shows. And I want to say it was like the first weekend of mainstream wrestling shows that I did. Vance Nevada, who was wrestling for Real Action Wrestling at the time. And Real Action Wrestling, for anybody who doesn't know watching this, was a legitimate full-time, like it was the last territory before it, 100%. Because they were legitimately running full time in the Maritimes. Like everybody
7 days
there
a
had
week.
7 days a week. Everybody had deals, like contract deals. Like it was a thing. So when I first started, that was my goal, was to wrestle for Real Action Wrestling. And to me, anybody that wrestled for Real Action Wrestling may have well as been a big a star, like as the WWE guys, you know, like it was like WWE, WCW, Real Action, or ECW, Real Action Wrestling. That was how I viewed it. So like guys like Gary Williams and Kingman and Mike Hughes and, you know, Bobby Roode, and those guys were real stars to me before I even knew who they really were. And Chi Cruz. I fucking forgot Chi Cruz.
Chi Cruz, Eddie Watts.
These are all like, they're like things that you envision that you just don't think are real in this weird way, because the internet was just kind of starting to be a thing around that time. So, when I first got down there, having Vance Nevada in a mainstream wrestling locker room was A, taboo, B, I'm pretty sure against his contract, and C, nobody gave a fuck because nobody was getting paid at Real Action Wrestling at the time, and Vance was just there to make some money. I didn't really know the details of the not getting paid part, but we're going to get into that.
He got so much heat for that, so much heat.
Oh my God, which led to the best fucking promo ever. So anyway, he winds up in this locker room, and they were asking, like, do you want to wear a mask so that way nobody sees who you are? But that weekend we were at a fair, and I shit you not, I ended up wrestling Vance Nevada even after the promoter was like hell bent on me not wrestling him. But because I'd ask Devin, I was like, hey man, can I please wrestle Vance? Can I please wrestle Vance? Can I please wrestle Vance? Like we've got like 3 shows to do today. Give me Vance Nevada. I want to wrestle him. I want to see where I'm at. No, you're not ready. You're not ready. And that's when it kept like, I'm like, okay, these guys are on another level. These Real Action Wrestling guys.
Should be wrestling Vance. That's 100%. The time you should be wrestling Vance, is when you're a rookie, to learn from him. Not ready. That's horseshit.
So when he told me that I wasn't ready, I was just like, well, then fuck it. I'm going to go and pick his brain, and I'm going to get everything out of Vance Nevada that I can. So I went and moved my bags right beside him. I'm like, sorry if this bothers you, man, but like, I'm not allowed to wrestle you. So I'm going to just sit here and get as much out of it as I can. And he's just like, what do you mean you're not allowed to wrestle me? And I was like, yeah, I asked the promoter that I really want to wrestle you, but you're a Real Action Wrestling guy. That's where I want to be. So if that's where I want to be, I want to wrestle the guys that are there. I want to see where I'm at. I want to make sure that I'm good enough. I want to be there. I want to be wrestling you on a nightly basis. So he just stands up. Hey, Devin. Yeah. I'm wrestling this guy. Ben, right? Yep. I'm wrestling Ben Sean Morgan. Wait, why? Well, he's the only one in this fucking locker room that had the audacity and decency to come up and ask if he could wrestle me. So I want to wrestle him. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh my God, I learned the trick. Okay, I got it. So he had no other choice but to say yes, because he's calling him out in the locker room, and he's Vance fucking Nevada. You know what I mean? So I went out and wrestled the Vance Nevada in front of 2 kids, their mother, and a dog. I will never forget that. So we got out there, and I'm like, what do we do? He's like, I'm going to try to teach you how to wrestle. And I'm like, thank you. So we would just, like, he called the whole thing, and I remember distinctly, he had me in like this leg lock where he was standing up, and he's like, okay, sell. And I'm like, okay. So I'm selling. He's like, okay, so reverse this. And I'm like, can I be honest with you, sir? I don't know how. I'm sorry. And he's like, oh, no problem, kid. I got you. And he explains to me, like he's like, okay, take your foot, hit me in the chest, boom. And he's like, and just when you kick me hard because I need you to follow through, okay? And I'm like, okay. So I kicked him hard and I followed through. And next thing I know, I'm on my feet and I've got his leg. And I'm like, what now? He's like, you've got the same hold, dummy. Sell it. And I'm like, holy shit, I do. Ah! So like I learned so much, like just wrestling him. And then when we got to the back, he's just like, what are you doing on fucking whatever day this is? And I'm like, nothing. And he's just like, do you want to come to the Real Action Wrestling tapings and wrestle me? I need an opponent. And I'm like, fuck yeah. Can I bring my trainer? Realizing now that was a stupid ass thing to say, because asking to bring anybody's like silly once you're getting the job that you want and you're getting the opportunity that you want. You have to take care of yourself. But then it also, I still think to this day, that was what caused this weird kink in the relationship with me and Jerry Martel, because I got asked to go to Real Action Wrestling first before he did. And I asked to bring him with me. And I think that was a slight blow at his ego that I would oddly enough understand. If I was like, if like say the WWE had did the same, if like all of a sudden, and I would be super proud of my guys, but like there would be that slight like, oh, I got in because they wanted, they're looking at him.
Yeah.
Fuck. Okay. So then I got there that day and it ended up being the last Real Action Wrestling show ever.
Yeah.
But for some reason, and again, like I'm assuming that it's got to be the reason that you kind of did the same thing. But I remember walking up specifically, I was trying to introduce myself to everybody. I was scared shitless because this was at the Halifax Forum. There's production. I've never been in a show where there's production before. And like,
it was a big crowd that night too. There was like 600 people there.
Yeah. And so I'm nervously like walking up to people trying to introduce myself. I remember specifically going up to Bobby Roode and Bobby was like leaning up against the ring, and I didn't know what was going on politically behind the scenes with the pay, everybody getting fucked over or whatever, but he's just sitting there on the ring. And I walked over to like, I think his right side, and I tapped him and I'm like, excuse me, Mr. Roode, how are you doing? I'm Ben. Nice to meet you. And I just remember he just,
That's funny.
And then didn't even acknowledge me, and then just went back to just whatever he was doing. And I'm like, so Mike Hughes, Gary Williams, and Duke McIsaac see this go down. Mike comes over and grabs me by my collar, and he's just like, hey man, don't worry about Bobby right now. Just come hang out with us, okay? And I was just like, with like you and okay. And next thing I know, Eddie Watts came up to me, gave me he's like, go into the ring, show me a spot with your trainer. So I show him a spot. He's like, okay, I want you guys to do that tonight, and then Vance Nevada is going to come down and then beat you guys up, and then he's going to cut a promo. And I'm like, okay, wait, what the fuck did you just say? Like in a match? He's like, yeah, you're going to wrestle tonight. And I'm like, I got my tryout.
I remember you this was the early days of text messaging. I remember you texting me saying, I've got a huge surprise for you tonight. And then when your music hit, I'm a star, superstar. I'm like, holy shit.
So it was nuts because I specifically like remember getting a reaction because people knew who I was because I was doing the mainstream wrestling stuff at the time. Blew my fucking mind. Like, here I am, like at Real Action Wrestling in the Halifax Forum, which is like the Madison Square Garden of maritime wrestling, if anybody doesn't understand this. And I'm getting a pop. I'm like, oh my God, like what is going on? Like, this is crazy. So we do our spot. Vance Nevada comes down, beats our ass. And this was the first time in wrestling I had ever like broke character, because Vance's promo, he went hard in the fucking paint on The Office that night. Like that was the first time I'd ever really kind of been introduced to a real shoot promo, like in front of an audience, because he went hard. And like, I'm laughing my balls off, but like trying to sell. And then I remember getting to the back, and I remember, was it Bryant Marchant
Brian
and
Marchand and Warren
Warren
Olson.
Warren Olson.
Yeah.
Pulled me aside. They were just like, "You did a great job tonight." Eddie Watts came up to me. "You did a great job tonight." Chi Cruz came up to me. "You did a great job tonight." And I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is amazing." And I get a call the next day from Brian, and he offers me a deal for $300 a week. He's like, your travel will be paid for. I'm gonna pay you $300 a week to start, but I like what I saw, and I think that you got a lot of potential. He's like, I just want you to really make sure that you focus on getting in the gym because we go hard. And I was just like,
Yep.
Yes, sir. And he's just like, we're going to start up again in about 2 to 3 weeks. So I will keep in touch, and congratulations, you're on the team.
That's awesome. Too bad it didn't go anywhere.
I made it. And then, 2 days later, they folded. So that really hurt.
Do you remember the story? You're talking about Vance's promo that night.
Yeah.
Do you remember? You weren't there, but do you remember what or ever hear of what he did on the show before that one when he wrestled under the mask? Where he brought crayons to the ring and drew a house on the canvas and then said nobody can say that Vance Nevada never drew a house in the Maritimes?
I think he might have told me about that.
Yeah.
My favorite Vance Nevada promo that I've never actually seen or heard, I've just heard the legend of, because Vance told me about it, but I've heard, like, it's been confirmed that it happened, was in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. And Vance came out, and he was just done at this point with Real Action Wrestling. He didn't care whether he got the heat or not. And and Vance was doing this gimmick like a Mr. Beefy Goodness. So he was kind of like this like older, sleazy, like if people could really envision it, imagine like an older like an older dad bod Joey Ryan meets Val Venus.
Yeah. But
less
attitude era. He was more PG.
Old school as fuck. Yeah. So he came out, and his promo went something along the lines of, everybody knows that the ladies absolutely love when Vance Nevada comes in your mouth.
All right, so maybe he wasn't PG.
Ooh, not that night. Did you ever hear that? Or do you have that footage? Because I would love to see that.
I don't. That's the first time I ever heard that one.
Oh man, he told me about that a couple of times, and
that's crazy.
Died. I was just like, "Is that actually happened?" But yeah, Steen was there. He confirmed it. There was a few people that confirmed that. But that's cool thing was that opened the doors again. Like getting to wrestle Vance that night opened the door to Real Action Wrestling. That then opened the door to me going out to East Coast Championship Wrestling to wrestle in the West Coast because Vance offered me a place to stay on his couch. So I went out there and wrestled in Vancouver for like 3 or 4 months, I want to say, and had some of the most fun, best matches, made friends for life out there, and which also opened up doors to a few months later where I ended up getting to do the Hell Tour with Tony Condello.
Yeah.
So
and you also worked for Mike before you left here too in PEI.
Yeah, I did. Mike,
it's the night you like broke your ankle or whatever.
That's right. My ankle shot right through my boot actually, and I never actually ended up getting it. Went to a hospital and I never got it fixed. That was a weird night because I remember because Mike did that spot show in Prince Edward Island a little after Real Action Wrestling died. I want to say
it was in November. Real Action stopped in July, and he ran that show in November.
So I remember when Mike contacted me again. It was one of those like he asked me. He's like, "Hey man, you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I would fucking love to." He's like, because clearly those guys saw potential in me, and I think that this has kind of been like the story of my career. That people saw that I had the work ethic. I genuinely loved the business. I really wanted it, but I was so misguided.
Yeah.
So
misguided. And a lot of people, even to this day, well, back then, would message me and be like, because they know I'm friends with most of these guys outside of it, and Mike or whoever would message me and be like, what's Ben like, or what's this new guy like? And if they were good, I'd be like, they're good. So when people would ask me about you, that's what I would say. I would like, he's good. He wants to learn was basically my thing to everybody. I'm like, he's green for sure, but he wants to learn, and he will listen to you, because at that point you'd listen.
Well, yeah, especially especially at that time, because I think that like once I moved down to the Maritimes, it was kind of when my attitude started to change, just because I realized that like, okay, I got what I wanted, and like I've got these people that are willing to help me, and I think I'm getting old enough now that I could start to see that like, yeah, you did some dumb kid stuff, and I still did, and I still do. But that's the process of growing, I guess, right? But but they definitely, for some reason, saw something in me, because I remember Mike was just like, hey, I can't pay you much. I can pay you this. And when he said that to me, I'm like trying to play it off. I'm like, you know what? That's fine. I'll take it, just because of the learning experience. It was the highest fucking payday I'd ever gotten in my life up until that fucking point. Because those guys.
You were a big kid. We didn't have a lot of big guys. We still don't. You're what, like 6'2"?
Yeah, 6'2", and at the time I was probably like 240.
So you were a bigger guy than what we usually have. I mean, like Scott was in great shape, but he was like 5'10". You know what I mean? There wasn't a lot of big guys, so that definitely helped you as well.
That, and I was a bigger guy that could move like a smaller guy. I've always kind of had that thing to me, like where I've actually been able to move pretty well for my size. That probably was a mix, because man, like looking back at it, like it bums me out that I was this close to getting like the education that I always wanted. Like, had that gone another year, or like had it maybe I'd been down like a year previously, or like just the timing of everything, man, like because the crew that was there still, because people don't understand how talented that fucking Real Action Wrestling crew really was.
It was, dude, most of those guys could have showed up on TV at that time and not looked out of place. Like, tell me in 2002 that Bobby Roode was on WWE TV occasionally at the time. Tell me he couldn't have showed up and looked good. Cowboy Mike Hughes was amazing. His promo skills at the time, well, still, are out of this world. Plus, he can wrestle. Brody Steele is a fucking giant. He could have done it. Gary Williams, amazing. Chi Cruz, amazing. All of those guys could have showed up on television and not looked out of place.
Chi Cruz, in my opinion, is
a sad story. Like, not for his life, but that he never made it. Because he came in with Jericho. He came in with Lance Storm. I have the tapes. How he never got the break with those guys is beyond me, because he's just as good.
He is literally the most talented wrestler, in my opinion, ever, that never got to be on that main stage.
Yeah, he's definitely up there.
And this is another reason why I'm super grateful for the opportunity that it opened up for the Northern Hell Tour with Vance Nevada that we were just discussing. Because when Vance called me, I remember specifically, he called me on my cell phone. I was in an internet cafe in Hamilton where I was living at the time, because I was a broke ass wrestler, man. And
internet cafes.
Yep. Calls me. He's like, "What are you doing?" So I'm at an internet cafe, man. I'm just killing time. What are you doing? Nothing. I got a question for you. Okay. Can you get to Winnipeg by the night? I don't know. Let me look. Weird thing is, I didn't even like question. I'm like, what the fuck? Why would you ask me that? I was just like, I don't know. Yeah. Let me look. I'm at a computer.
Why am I coming?
I'm at a computer. Like, I guess I can look up like flights and see if like it's possible. I'm like, he's probably asking me for a reason. And I'm like, well, turns out that I can't get there tonight, but I can get there first thing in the morning. Why do you ask, Vance? Do you want to do the Northern Hell Tour with Tony Condello? Like the one that like Jericho, Edge, like all the one that makes you like an actual legit Canadian. Yeah. Yep. Yes, I do. He's like, okay, cool. Go get your shit ready and get that flight and just get down there. They'll worry about the money. They'll worry about just get that, just pay for the flight. Just get down there. And I'm like, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I'm like, but hang on a second. Who the fuck is doing this tour? He's like, Chi Chi Cruz is on the tour. And I'm like,
yeah.
I'll get to wrestle Chi Chi Cruz? He's like, maybe if you play your cards right. He's like, I'll ask Canelo if you can. And I'm like, please ask Canelo if you can. That's like why I'm doing this. I will put down like every last dollar I've got right now if I can wrestle Chi Chi Cruz on this tour. It's like, just get that fuck down there. So I got the fuck down there. And our buddy, Cheeves, was down there already.
That's the one she did too.
Yeah. Cheeves did it. And she came and picked me up from the airport with another friend of ours, Ashley. She's from Portland. I can't remember what her wrestling, Avalon. That's what it was. So they picked me up from the airport.
Oh, right. I forgot about her. Yeah.
They bring me to the hotel where like they had me crash and like all the foreigners crash and whatever. And then like when we were in town. So we get there, meet the crew. And then all of a sudden, like Canelo, like kind of comes in and he like, all of a sudden everybody like lines up. It's like the fucking army. And I didn't even really know what Canelo looked like. I just heard the legend of Tony Canelo at this point. Right. So then all of a sudden we lined up and you're just like, kind of like drill sergeant shit. And then next thing I know, he's like going down the line of everybody like, hello. Hello. And then he comes to me and he's like, who the fuck are you? Like, I'm Sean Morgan. I'm Ben. Sorry, I'm Ben. I wrestle with Sean Morgan.
Yeah.
Vance Nevada sent me down here, sir. I'm Vance Nevada's guy. Kid, you look like a fucking grizzly bear.
Grizzly Morgan. I forgot about that.
And he just continued walking. And he ended up calling me Grizzly Morgan throughout the tour. So then we ended up getting in the van and we're doing the first leg of the tour. And thankfully I got to kind of like weasel my way into shotgun into Tony's van while he was driving. Cause I'm like, oh my God, I've got so much like brain to pick here. This is going to be so great. So then the first thing he tells me, he's just like, I got you wrestling this young guy this tour there, kid. I'm excited to see what you can do with this young guy. And I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway, I can wrestle Chi Chi Cruz. Vance said that I could wrestle Chi Chi Cruz. He's like, oh, Chi Chi Cruz is our guy. You got to fucking earn your goddamn way to wrestle Chi Chi Cruz. No, you will wrestle this young guy, and possibly we will see from there. Like, who's this fucking young guy? His name is Kenny Omega. He's not bad. And I'm like, fuck.
He's not bad.
And I'm like, for fuck's sakes, I gotta wrestle this fucking asshole, right? So then I remember I was mad, and then like Danny Duggan, and he's just like kind of slapped me on the shoulder. He was on the tour as like is Kenny's kind of young boy. He was the only one there that wasn't wrestling. But he's like, hey, do you know who this guy is? And I'm like, who is? He's like, you know who Kenny Omega is? And I'm like, I don't fucking know who Kenny Omega is. I'm like, well, I give a fuck. He's like, who? Just out of curiosity, he's like, who's the top guy in Ontario? And I'm like, Showtime Eric Young, no question. He's the Showtime Eric Young of Winnipeg. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm looking forward to wrestling him. And we had some really fun matches. He was still like just breaking in at that point. So like he wasn't really anybody at that point, but like it's just funny to kind of look back. I'm wrestling Kenny Omega and I'm still begging to wrestle Chi Chi Cruz like on the tour. And then eventually I ended up getting my chance. And then I'll never forget, like I went up to him and
do you have any of those Omega matches on tape?
If I do, Chi Chi Cruz has them. And okay. I don't know what he did with them because I would be very interested to see what those look like because
I'll send them a message after we're done.
Do it because he might actually have them somewhere in storage. And I actually really want to get Cheech on the podcast because it's not enough people these days know who Cheech is. And I would really love to introduce people to Chi Chi Cruz. But even then I knew, like, I realized after the fact, I guess, like once I got home, but wrestling Kenny changed my whole outlook on wrestling because because it pissed me off because I grew up in that old school, like with that mentality of like old school, you know. That's why I wanted to wrestle Chi Cruz. And like when I did get to wrestle Cheech, I was like in awe because I went to ask him like, all right, well, what do you want to do? He's like, how much time do we got? And then Candelo's just like, I'm giving you guys 45 minutes. I'm like, fucking, what did you just say?
Iron Man.
I've never done 45 minutes before. And Cheech he's laughing at my deer in the headlights look. And I'm like, what do you want to do for 45 minutes? And Cheech, now that I know him, completely just fucking with me. He like looks at me and he does like one of these like kind of like him and Holland. And he's just like, stunner. And then just walks away. And I'm like, what does that mean? Do I take am I taking it? Oh no. I'm clearly taking the stunner.
Yeah.
What else are we doing? And he's just like, we'll figure it out. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And then it was that, like, Cheech taught me how to wrestle. Like, he taught me how to work in one night. We got to do it a couple more nights afterwards, but, like, he literally taught me the art of pro wrestling in one.
He did the same for Steen the year or two before you went. Steen trained with Devin, but then did the Death Tour and got trained the same way you did, but with Chi Cruz and Eddie Watts. So it was the same experience as you, just like a year or two before.
It was so crazy though, and like it's funny because I look back at that stuff and I thank because here's the thing, I thank Kenny for kind of twisting my view on wrestling, because the night that specifically that happened, if it wasn't for Cheech, me and Kenny would have it would have got bad, because I have never been more ready to fight another human being than I was that night. Because Kenny's style is like, it's just Kenny's style, and it wasn't really a thing then. He gave me this German suplex the one night, because we were doing a thing where me and him would wrestle each other in a singles match to open the show, and then I would beat Kenny in a singles match. Never beat
you
me
went
to this
over
day.
Omega. There you go.
He's never beat me in a singles match. That's fucking. It's like the only thing I can like have to, and it doesn't even matter. But then
it matters, baby. It matters.
But then we would wrestle again in the main event, in a tag match where it was me and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was one of Don Callis' students. We would wrestle him and Mighty Bruce the Midget from the West Coast.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah. So we did that like a bunch of nights, like a lot of the nights. And I just remember the one night in particular, it might have been the last night that we actually wrestled each other. We were kind of getting on one another's nerves because I wasn't taking jokes very well, as you know. I was very much I kind of had it. I don't want to say I still had the attitude, but I still had a attitude about me, you know?
So what year was this? 2004?
Yes.
5?
2004. Yeah. Because I was still very guarded, you know, I was young and just, I had no guidance and like parental figures. So like when people fucked with me, I just like, I took it to heart. So when they were ribbing me and fucking with me, I took it to heart. So so we were kind of on each other's last nerve. And I just remember like the one night we were wrestling and we were doing our singles match. He gave me this German where it was like a very much a snap Japanese Kenny Omega style German now, where like you would kind of bump like on the top of your neck. But like for me, I'm like, you flat back me, motherfucker. Like I had my bell rung and I was ready to fight him. Like I got back to the rest of that match. I don't even remember. I just remember being stiff as fuck. And then I was just like, oh, we have to do this again later. And I got back into my dressing room because there was still a heel and face dressing room on that tour. And I'm in the dressing room telling anybody that'll listen, I'm like, watch this main event because I'm gonna fuck this dude up, bro. Like I am fucking him up. Like I have never been more like, I'm gonna fight Kenny Omega tonight. And then Chi Cruz walked into our locker room and he's just like, what's going on with you? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, why am I hearing in the other locker room that you're going to fight Kenny Omega? And I'm like, because the motherfucker's dumping me on my head on purpose and shit like that. Like, who the fuck does this? Like, I get it. He's the guy, but you don't fucking dump me on my fucking head. Like, I'm feeling this shit, dude. I'm like, I don't need a goddamn concussion because this guy thinks he's the fucking man or whatever. I'm like, that's not how you fucking work and take care of people, Cheech. You should know this. And he's just like, oh, I do. But like, he understood where I was coming from. And then he like Chichi Cruz calmed me down. And I was still mad, but I'm like, okay, I'm not going to fight him, but I still got to do this match. And then next thing I know, like, me and him had the best match him and I had ever had because like we were just pissed at one another. And then we took shots at one another, like hard shots at one another during that tag match. And then next thing we knew, we were just gelling and vibing, and everything we did was fucking just perfect. The crowd was behind it. And then I remember one point specifically during that match, like we looked at one another and we're just like, you good? You good? We're good. Okay. So we're good. Let's fucking do this. And then like we just went to town for the match. And then when we got to the back, like where I thought we were going to fist fight, like we just hugged and I was just like, I'm sorry. Like you, sorry for everything. I thought you were this. I'm learning. And then I actually took that mentality home because I got to learn from like this. I got to learn from Cheech and Tony Condello about old school and etiquette and like respect and just all these different things while I was down there. But then was taught this like, oh, by the way, this is where wrestling is going. So you probably should learn this.
I really wish there was a story of you fighting Kenny Omega though, because that would be amazing.
No.
How many times did you wrestle him? Like, was it the whole tour?
The whole tour, with the exception of like 2 or 3 times that I wrestled Cheech.
That's awesome, man.
I think me and Kenny probably, like, I think we did 18 shows that tour, if I remember correctly. I think we did 18 shows, and I think I did 3 with Cheech and about like 15 with Kenny. So I probably wrestled him about 30 times or so.
That's awesome.
Like in the course of a month. So like it wasn't one of those.
No,
like, yeah, like
not many people have that. Like, he's arguably the greatest wrestler in the world right now. And you got to wrestle him a bunch of times early on in his career. There's not a lot of people that can like say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was cool. It was again, it was a huge learning experience because he wanted to do so much, and again,
he wanted to be what he does now, right?
Yeah, and growing up with that like maritime wrestling attitude, you're just like, we don't need to.
Everyone just grabs the headlock for 45 minutes.
Essentially, yeah. But then we would be like, okay, well, we don't need to do this. Like, we don't have to do this. He's like, okay, fine. And then we would wrestle, and he would just do the shit anyway. And I was just like, okay, like you're not like, okay, I'm understanding. Like it took me a little while, but like it was just a really solid education from, like that tour changed my life just because like getting those 3 different types of educations, again, from Cheech, from Tony, and then from Kenny. It was
that's amazing, dude. I don't think I realized
insane.
Mega was on that tour. I knew he wrestled there because when Steen and Scott went out in 2002, he was out there. They never got to wrestle him, but he was always around Top Rope Championship Wrestling and Bobby J. Like, so they got to know him too.
I think the promoter that he's close with is, I think his name is Andrew Shawcross, I want to say. Because whenever Kenny goes home, like to this day, like
PCW.
he's still...
Yeah. Was that PCW? Yeah, okay.
I think so. He probably did work with Bobby J, I'm sure, back in that time. But yeah, Kenny's very, very picky and choosy about who he does anything for, and has been for quite some time. Like I've actually tried to get Kenny to come down and do like an appearance. I've tried to get him down for like I've tried to talk to him about a couple of different times to come down and do something for me at my show. And
he's expensive.
Yes, very expensive.
We tried as well one time. We did a show called Alpha. And then the next show was going to be called Omega. This is years before Jericho and Omega did the Alpha thing. we did a show called Alpha, and we were going to announce Kenny Omega for the next show, but then the promotion went out of business, so it never happened.
Oh, that sucks. Now, out of curiosity, like if you would have brought Kenny in, who would you have had him wrestle?
At that, well, probably Dukes, because Dukes was here a lot. Dukes was the champion of the promotion, so probably Tyson Dukes.
I specifically wanted him to come in and work with Josh Alexander.
Okay.
I thought that I still think that if that ever happens, that could be one of the best pro wrestling matches that ever happens.
Josh was supposed to come out here in May, but then the world ended.
Well, Josh was actually making a few.
We had a huge show planned with Mick Foley, Vicky Guerrero, James Storm, Josh Alexander, Rhino, a few other people, and then the world stopped working, so it never happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, trust me, I know all about it, man. I was one of actually, I think I'm the first Canadian promoter in God knows amount of time. I got to book Alex Shelley.
Oh, wow.
I had Alex Shelley booked for my March show. And I think the last time he actually wrestled for in Canada was for a company in Toronto.
Okay.
And that was a long, long time ago. Because like other than that, he was only doing Border City wrestling stuff. Because Alex Shelley's pretty picky and choosy on who he wrestles for, even to this day. But Alessandro Del Bruno, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a very good friend of mine. He's been a huge, like he's been the backbone of crossbody pro wrestling. It's been like I've known Alessandro Del Bruno since we first started, and like his dream, like it was never to wrestle for the WWE. It was never to make millions. It was to wrestle Alex Shelley. Yeah. So I wanted to make that happen for my buddy, and it took me a long ass time and a lot of negotiation, but I got it done. And
that's sweet.
Yeah, well, it would have been fucking sweet had
Had
but the world not ended.
You're talking about people being like picky and choosy of where they work. Bobby Roode was the same way. He did like 0 indies. The only indie he did was House of Hardcore. But he would always come out here for me. I'd just be like, yeah, I got the show. And he's like, yep, I'll be out. I'm like, sweet. But he worked for nobody else. Why he came out here like 4 or 5 times for me with like no questions asked, like just blows my mind because he never did it for anybody else.
Yeah,
like,
it's weird, man. Because like he didn't wrestle. Like he almost made it a point to not wrestle in Ontario.
Yeah.
I think the only time that I ever saw him wrestle in Ontario, I was on the show. And the only reason why did he do Warrior 1?
He did, yeah. Team Canada.
Well, I was there for that. That was actually the first show that I ever got to like help produce, which is kind of nuts. But the first ever and only indie show I really ever saw him like wrestle on was for this group called CIWA. And I remember hearing through the grapevine, I could be wrong on this, but I doubt it, was the only reason why he agreed to do it was because he wanted to wrestle Eric Young. And Eric Young and him tore it the fuck up. Like,
yeah, I bet.
I just remember like the rest, like there was a few of us all looking around. We're just like, we don't do the same thing that those guys do.
That's a different job.
Yeah. What they just did and what it is that we're like trying to do.
Yeah. That's not the same thing.
That's not the same shit. That's not the same thing at all. New Scott. So one thing that we were just talking about is the one thing that I wanted to ask you is I'm curious about how you kind of like got into all of this, right? Because you started out with filming shows, like you started with the website, thenewscott.com. You became like this video library for everybody. You became a promoter. Like you've pretty much done everything but wrestle. So like I'm kind of curious as to like what got you how did your path start into what you do now?
Well, you mentioned newscott.com. Do you remember making some of the original graphics for newscott.com?
I do. Actually, I forgot about that until just now, but wow, I did, because I actually used to have somewhat of a computer skill at that time. I used to rock Angel Fire and GeoCities real fucking hard.
GeoCities was the shit, yo. GeoCities was so small, it only allowed a certain amount of megabytes. So
Yeah,
I had
that's right.
27 GeoCity sites, all linked under newscott.com. So if you went to it, you wouldn't know the difference. But for me uploading, it'd be like, okay, which GeoCity site is this file supposed to go to?
Yeah.
But the filming thing, I went to I saw a poster for a Grand Prix show. I had heard of Grand Prix. I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, but I never went to an independent wrestling show until I was 20. Because I didn't know it existed. I had heard of Grand Prix. I had heard of Leo Burke and the Beast, but I didn't really understand what it was. It didn't click with me for some reason to be like, hey, there's local wrestling at the Forum every week. So I saw a poster. It was a Grand Prix poster, and it said it was going to be at the Forum. And this was May 2001. So like, oh, I'm definitely going to this. And you can't see it, but I brought the round WWF World Championship with me, the one Triple H had for most of his run.
Okay.
The big round one, the big round eagle.
Yeah.
So I brought that because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. I don't know what I was expecting. You're supposed to bring your wrestling merch, right?
Yeah.
So I got to the show like 2 hours early. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting like this huge lineup of people. I wanted front row seats, baby. Like, this is my first indie wrestling experience. I had no idea what to expect. There was nobody else in line until the doors opened. But the promoter came out. The promoter's name back then, Emile Dupree, partnered with a guy named Mike Zink. No relation to Al Zink or Tom Zink.
Z-Man.
The Z-Man. But he worked with Emile and he worked with Devin a little bit, Devin Chittick. Yep. So he asks me if he can take the belt to show the boys. So I'm like, sure, I guess. And so he takes it. God knows, knowing what I know now, God knows what they did with that belt. Like I cleaned it with like spray nine and everything.
Just sanitize the hell out of it.
I don't want to touch this. Yeah. So I get in. There's like maybe 15 people in the audience. So I got my front row seat. That 2 hours outside paid off. Flesh Gordon comes out. Do you remember Flesh?
I absolutely remember Flesh because he's from Toronto. If you know Flesh, it's the greatest thing in the world because like you look at him and he's like the most intimidating, like he looks like he's out of a comic book.
He's as big as a wall.
But like the way that he talks is like the funniest shit because like he's got like this high pitched voice and everything is like, yeah, fucking right, buddy. Yeah. Let's go. We're gonna go fucking wrestle, buddy. Like it's the fucking funniest shit. Yeah, I love Flesh Gordon. He's a nice guy, man.
Yeah, Flesh is awesome. He made a Christmas video for my website last year. So Flesh comes out, takes the belt, holds it up. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. These guys like me. So after the show, this other guy comes out and he's like, I just wanted to come out and see the belt and all this stuff. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like the guy, the promoter or whoever took it back. He's like, yeah. He's like, I just wanted to see it like up close. I didn't get a chance then. I'm like, okay. That guy ended up being Scott Savage, Jeremiah Delinquent. He's like, we actually have another show coming up that's not Grand Prix on the weekend. You should come down to it. He's like, Mike Zink was standing there too. He was like, he's helping promote this show. And Mike was like, yeah, come on down. Just tell the people at the gate you're with the wrestling. You won't have to pay. I'm like, okay. So this is in Bridgewater, which is about an hour and 20 minute drive from Halifax. We get there. I don't tell the person at the gate I'm with the wrestling. It was like $5. It was like a fair. It was like the Bridgewater Exhibition Fair. There was rides, there was everything. So I'm like, there's no way they have a list. Like, so I just pay to get in, and I go up, and I'm looking around for everybody, and I find them. Jerry Martel and Flex Falcone were on this show too. So we get Ann Quinton. So we get there. I find where they're getting changed. I stay outside, and Scott comes out, and he's like, just come stand in here. I'm like, okay. And then Mike Zink takes the belt and shoot, hit Scott in the head with it. Scott takes a big old bump on the floor. But anyway, this is the Bridgewater exhibition. There was about 2,500 people there. No joke, to watch mainstream wrestling. It was huge. They disliked the product so much. Just before intermission, they just started throwing rocks at the ring. Flex and Jerry were in the ring because it was in the middle of like where horses and stuff would run, right? That's where they had the ring in a dirt pile thing. And people were just started pelting the ring and pelting the boys with rocks. So they canceled the show. That was my second indie show experience. So
holy shit.
Yeah. So I would go back and they were like, we're not doing the rest of the show. I'm like, well, I kind of figured. And then Scott says, is like, can somebody drive me home? For some reason, Scott didn't have a drive home. I'm like, I can drive you home. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I should have asked where he lived because fuck, I could have drove like 3 hours the wrong direction. Luckily, he lived in Dartmouth. It was like 20 minutes from where I lived. So me and Scott talked wrestling the entire way home, right? WWE, ECW, just wrestling. He adds me to MSN. You remember MSN from back in the day?
Of course
MSN
I do.
And we became friends on that. And through that, me and Scott started traveling in the ring truck to all these shows. So within like 3 shows, I come from bringing my world title belt to a show to now driving in the ring truck with Scott, setting the ring up, like getting it from this guy's shed that was in a swamp and just like it was a horrible situation. Looking back at it now, what me and Scott had to do to get this ring for these shows was ridiculous. I couldn't imagine any of the guys doing it now. We didn't think anything of it, right? It was just like, I was pumped. I was touching a wrestling ring. You know what I mean? Like, this dream come true. And then I saw an ad in the newspaper. I had never seen an ad for independent wrestling anywhere ever before. The very second I started going to the shows, I saw them everywhere. I couldn't walk by a telephone pole. I couldn't open up a newspaper. Like, I don't know if I was just missing it or not paying attention, but I saw an ad in the paper, and it was like wrestling at Exhibition Park. It had a picture of TID. It had a picture of Cowboy Mike Hughes and Brody Steele. I'm like, these guys look like wrestlers. Because no offense to Scott or Steen, if you're looking at Kingman and Pete, or Kingman and Cowboy, you're like, okay, these guys look like the people I watch on television. So I go early to that show too. There's a lineup for this show. I'm like, okay, maybe this is different. Real Action Wrestling, like we talked about earlier, when they hit Halifax, it was 1,500 people every Tuesday night. I think it was Tuesday or Thursday night. Every 2 weeks, they ran Halifax. It was jam-packed. This was before they went to the Forum. This was at Exhibition Park, which is 10, 15 minutes from the Forum. Most of my footage, if you watch it on my channel, is from Exhibition Park. So I sat in the crowd, and I'm watching these guys. I'm watching Chi Chi Cruz. I'm watching Bobby Roode. For some reason, I'm like, looking around. I'm like, nobody's filming this. I was like, these guys should be able to see what they do. I don't know why that thought came into my mind. This was before YouTube. This was before the internet. There was a Real Action Wrestling message board. That's the only thing that was around, like on the internet for wrestling around here. Real Action, or it was raw.cjb.net. So I go out the very next day, drop like $1,000 on a Sony video camera for some unknown reason. I'm like, and I go back the next week. I don't even know if I'm allowed to tape these shows. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the rules are. So I walk in with the video camera. I'm like, where's the best place to film? I get in the front row. I'm like, I'm kind of too far away, or I'm kind of too close to get everything. I didn't know anything about filming at this point, right? So I'm sitting in the front row. I'm like, I don't like this seat. So I back up to the lower bowl, sit where I would later learn what hard cam was, sit dead center, hold the camera. I'm like, I can scan everywhere. I can zoom in from here if I want to get closer. So that's where I sat for every show, in that same seat at Exhibition Park, what is known as hard cam. that's what I was doing. So now I have all this footage. I don't know any of the guys from Real Action Wrestling. None of Scott or Steen at this point know any of those guys, right? Because there was a big divide between Real Action Wrestling and mainstream wrestling. No offense to the mainstream wrestling guys. It was just levels above, right?
Yeah.
So there's a message board. I'm like, I have this footage. I'm like, this is 2001. There's no YouTube till 2006. So I'm like, I have this footage. I'm like, if anyone wants to see it, just let me know. I can make like a VHS tape. I get a message from a girl asking me if I was the guy that was filming in the crowd. One of the wrestlers noticed and was wondering if they could see the footage. I'm like, absolutely. I'm like, tell whoever it is to contact me. I can send them a tape. Mike Hughes sends me an email. So I spend the next year or so mailing VHS tapes to PEI for for Cowboy, right? That was the only way to get footage to people, right? And then Cowboy would have people over to his place and they would watch the tapes. Mike liked what I was doing, so he kept asking me to come back. I only ever paid for like one Grand Prix show and one Real Action Wrestling show before they brought me in to like actually film the shows. And the only reason they brought me in to film the shows because I was the only one with a video camera. There was no like, this guy's awesome, cool, or whatever, right? They're like, this guy's got a video camera. We can use that. And I was all for it, right?
It's funny you say that because I actually remember that actually being a thing. I was just like, this is the video camera guy because he's the one that's got one. But hey, fuck, you got your foot in the door, right?
That was it. Like, that was my in, going out. Yeah, that was my in, like, just going out and buying a video camera. Like, if I didn't go buy that camera, we wouldn't be sitting here today. Like, so then I ended up going on the road with them, traveling with them, setting up the ring, setting up chairs or whatever, just doing everything they asked, no matter how stupid it was. It was, yes, sir, absolutely. Go to the store and buy me an egg. All right, I'll go to the store and buy you an egg. What's it for? Doesn't matter. I'm like, okay. So I just did everything, and that's how I eventually got in. Like, was just driving in the ring truck, setting up the ring, tearing down the ring, just doing everything that I was asked for, driving the boys. Not everybody had a driver's license. I had a car and a driver's license, and they were like, can you get to Yarmouth or Lunenburg for Saturday? We'll pay your gas. We just need a place for 4 people to sit. I'm like, absolutely. So I just drove Steen and Scott and Sarah everywhere for a long time. And that was how I got in.
Well, that for all you young wrestlers that are listening to this and are kind of confused by what he was just talking about, this is what we refer to as it's called paying your dues. And it's a time-honored tradition that we still do, hopefully. And it was what got you respect in the business back in the day. And you were not allowed to do jack shit unless you paid your dues and earned your respect. And it's funny because to tie back to a story that we were talking about earlier, at one of Mike Hughes's shows the first show that he promoted in Prince Edward Island, that was the first time that I think it was the first or second time that I'd ever met Peter Smith and Kingman.
Yeah, Brody Steele.
So I just remember we showed up that day, and it was a really cool drive. I remember just because there was like that 20-minute long highway over that lake or whatever to get to the tolls, and it was like the trippiest thing in the world. I didn't even know that it existed.
The Confederation Bridge is what you're talking about.
Yeah, was so cool. So we drive over there. And we get there, and I remember, like, you see all the boys, and you're like, yeah, hey, what's up, guys? What's going on? What's going on? I saw you, and I'm like, hey, what's going on, buddy? And the next thing I know, I see Pete, and I see Mike, and I could kind of see, like, I just saw Pete was angry, like, fucking angry. And I had no clue why. But alls I know is that he screamed at you to come hither, basically. Like you were
Oh yeah.
summoned, you were fucking summoned in front of everybody. Like,
Oh
and
yeah.
like it was one of the worst fucking verbal beatdowns I'd ever seen, especially at that time. And I was like, yo, what the fuck did this guy do?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Like like why did you get called out? And like what was the whole Go ahead. You tell your side.
This is a hilarious story. He denies that to this day. Me and Pete are super tight now. He was at my wedding, really good friends. He denies that happens to this day. I'm like, there was a room full of people.
I did not pull that story out of my ass, I promise.
Yeah. He just doesn't want to believe. He just doesn't want to think that he did that to me, right? It's hilarious now, though. I mention it all the time. But me, Steen, Vinny Clyde, and Cinder, we drive over to PEI for the show. We walk in the building. Everyone says hello. Mike's like, hey. And then Peter comes out of the dressing room. All I remember is the bright orange pants that Peter was wearing, because they were like, Pete's like 6'8", 320 pounds, just a giant of a human being. And he's like, are you the one they call New Scott? Yes. Over here now. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh God. And then Mike yells, this is my first time ever in a backstage atmosphere with these guys, right? Because every other time I would just go and sit out front.
Yeah.
But now that I was traveling with them, there was no other choice, right?
Yep.
Unless I like just waited outside the building for 10 hours. So he's like, over here now. I'm like, oh fuck. And then
I fucking almost pissed my pants when that happened. I couldn't even imagine what the fuck was going on in your head. Holy.
And then Mike yells, nice knowing you, New Scott. I'm like, oh God. I'm like, this is horrible. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. He proceeds to yell at me for 45 minutes. Like, I don't get a word in. About a minute into him yelling at me, I realize exactly what he's talking about and realize I had absolutely nothing to do with it. There was something bad written about him on the internet. And according to him, I ran the internet. Like he's still trying to hook his Atari up to a potato, right? Like he knew absolutely nothing. Since something was bad about him, and I was the internet guy that had the website, I was the one that wrote it. I realized a minute into his yelling at me, I had nothing to do with it. But I just stood there. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. For what seemed like an eternity.
Yeah, it was.
And then he's like, okay. And then he walks away. And I know exactly who he was talking about. I knew the whole situation, but I wasn't about to correct him because that would have made the whole thing way. Like, Peter, you're wrong.
Well, you've seen from experience what that does to people.
Yeah,
you don't correct them.
No, I could only imagine like that happening to wrestlers around today. They'd be like, he's bullying me. He's bullying me. I'm like, no. I'm like, it's paying your dues. Like, I'm so like, there might be a line, sure, but what he did, I don't have a problem with. The way I put it, Mike is your cool older brother. Mike was one of the nicest human beings ever. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But Peter is like your dad or your grandfather. The guy that makes you earn that respect, that makes you like work for it. And it was about 5 years before he treated me like a human being. Like every morning after the show at breakfast, he would call me a pussy and ask me why I didn't want to be a wrestler. At the time, I was 5'11" and 120 pounds. And I didn't know what to say to this guy, but it happened every single day in front of everybody. Hey, pussy, why don't you want to be a wrestler? I'm like, I don't know, sir. But luckily Steen was with me and would be like, look at him. You'd break him because I was as big as like my pinky from my feet to my head, right?
Yeah, you were
So, but I
scrawny
jumped.
back then. You did not have the muscle
Yeah.
mass you do now, for sure.
No, I've gained 95 pounds since then.
Yeah, you
I've
gained a
gained a
human
human.
being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that went on for years, and I just took it. And then eventually, he started treating me like a human, and I was like, I remember the first thing he said to me that made me realize, like, okay, he actually likes me now. He says to me, he's like, I normally shun the internet. I normally shun the internet in favor of the real world, but you're all right. I'm like, I'm in. I'm like, that's the thing. And then 8 years later, he's at my wedding, dancing with his daughter and his wife. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it came along, but did he make me earn it? And I would not have wanted it any other way. I can honestly say that I paid my dues back then with those guys to be able to. I don't like saying that because it makes me seem like, oh, he thinks he's a big deal or whatever. But they made me work for it. I wasn't a wrestler. Back then, there was nobody around that wasn't part of the show. You were a wrestler, a ring announcer, or a referee. There was nobody else allowed anywhere. And another thing he said, it was about 5 years before I went into the locker room too. I promoted my own shows and didn't go into the locker room. Bobby Roode came out one time and he's like, we're trying to get a group picture. He's like, can we come back here? I'm like, I'm not allowed back there. He's like, it's your show. Get the fuck back here. I'm like, okay. So I went out back, took the picture, and left again. Mike Hughes did all of my shows, and I would always put him, well, not put him, he assumed charge of the locker room, right? So he would come out. I would tell him everything. Like, he let me book the show. He just made it better. I would tell him what I wanted, and then he would just go back. Never stepped foot in the dressing room in shows I promoted for years. Just because it wasn't my place. I still don't like to be back there now, but sometimes there's nowhere else to go, right? It's the boys' home for whatever time they're there. Most of the spaces aren't big enough for them, so they don't need an extra body in there taking up space, right? So unless there's a situation that needs me to be back there, I'm back there now more often because I do a lot more stuff than what I usually do. Like, I help run everything now.
Yeah.
So I am back there more, but if there's a time that I don't have to be there, I'm not there. It's just not my place, right? I've seen so many people that are just like, oh, I want to be backstage in the locker room, like just regular folks that are there with friends or whatever. I'm like, man, you shouldn't be back here. This is their home. This is where everything happens. Like, you don't. Like, I've seen people get yelled at and kicked out of the locker room and not understand and be upset of why they're getting kicked out. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I went off on a rant there, but
no, it's okay. But you said something there that
baffles me.
You said something there that's really important, and I don't think a lot of people understand it, and that the locker room really is our home. And for people that don't understand that, like, imagine being an indie wrestler. It doesn't matter whether you do it full-time or do it part-time. Okay. Because, like, whether you do it full-time, you're spending a lot of your time on the road. Like, you're traveling, like, you're putting a fucking grind in, like, you're in the gym, you're living a very, very, very difficult life. So when you get to the venue, that locker room is like your one place to just shed all of that skin of, like, having to worry about being perfect for the world. You can just, like, it's like it almost, in a weird way, it's almost like when the best way I can explain it is for, like, when anybody gets home from work and then you just go to the bathroom. That's your time. Whatever you do, whether you fucking sit on the toilet, just let and, like, that's you. Whatever you do, once, like, you that's your space, and you're in there with very like-minded people who are all working just as hard as you for the same goal. And, you know, like, you're in with it's your safe zone. So, like, whether you're a full-timer that does that, or whether you're a part-timer who has to work full-time during the week, like, you're working your ass off at your day job from 9 to 5. And then at nighttime, you're going to the gym. And then after the gym, you're going to wrestling training. And then by the time you get home, there's literally an hour to cook your meals for the next day, get a slight bite to eat, and then have to go to sleep, and then wash, rinse, repeat the next day. That's tough. So when you get to that weekend, when it's your time to be weekend warrior guy, and it's your time to get into that locker room is you're like, oh, I can breathe. That this is my safe zone with my safe people that have done and have put in the same amount of work and sacrifice into their life, into their career, into their craft that I have. Like that's the best way I can explain it. So like, I'm so glad that you actually explained that, because there are people, especially in our neck of the woods, that feel that they kind of deserve to be back in the locker room, and feel that they deserve to too. And feel like they deserve to be like in the shows a little earlier than fans per se. You know what I mean? And it's just like,
preach, brother, preach.
To you guys, it's like, hey, I get to go in and be a part of something that maybe I shouldn't be. And I get that for people. It's cool. What they don't understand is that they're invading our time and our privacy with our family and our coworkers, and potentially invading time and space into planning out our night's work. And I'm not saying anything that people don't know. It's just that, like, you're potentially taking away from the magic that you were here to see. Yeah. Why are you doing that? And you're taking away from the small amount of time that I've got with my set of people and my coworkers and my friends to be able to be the best me that I can be for the people that are here. Like, it's just people don't understand that, I don't think. And
not at all. Yeah.
And that's I'm just glad that you put that the way that you did, because, like, I mean, for crossbody, like, our locker room is so small. Like, I don't want to get into specifics, but it's like the actual area itself is so small. So, like, I'm very, very guarded with who comes in there and who doesn't. But, like, there are certainly people that, like, you kind of have to, like, pull aside from time to time and being like, yo, like, this isn't like I'm not trying to pull a heavy here and being like, yo, you don't deserve to be back. It's like, this is our small space. Like, quit trying to invade it. Like, be out there. Like, you'll get to spend time with us, you know? So with that being said, like, I guess you eventually earn the respect of the boys through, like, you're paying your dues. Like, cause that definitely answers my next question as to, like, what kept you around. But, like, I mean, what keeps you around now? Because the reality is the landscape that's down there, like, this kind of ties into what I was saying in my introduction, like, with how influential you are. Like, you've got the most time, with the exception of probably Mike and Pete down there.
Yeah, Mike, Pete, Steen, Duke. That's about it. That's still active.
Duke's back. Is he working again?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that guy.
He works for like 2 promotions. He doesn't work as much as he used to, but he does work a few times a year. He's so good, dude. He's another guy that.
I apologize. I forgot to mention Steen. I that was actually a complete.
Still got that heat, brother?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, if he comes at me and if I get that fucking Instagram message, he's like, we still got heat, bro. I swear to God.
What keeps me around is the same thing that made me want to be around earlier. We have so many talented kids here now. Oh man, I got into a car to go somewhere for a show last year. I'm looking in the car. I'm like, you're 20, you're 23, you're 21. I'm like, when the fuck did I become the old guy? Because that used to be me. Like, I used to be the 21-year-old in the car. But we have so many young, talented guys that don't know what to do or how to do it. And a lot of them don't feel comfortable for whatever reason going. I know why. It's because they're intimidated. They don't feel comfortable going to a Peter Smith or a Mike Hughes to ask, like, what do I do? Because they're scared or they're intimidated. They absolutely should. But I'm not one of those guys, and they know I've been around a while. So a lot of them will come up and be like, so are you going to Sheldon's? Are you going to the ECPW show? Yeah, I film all of those shows. They're like, how do I get booked? So if I think this is going to sound bad, if I think the person is good enough, I'll message Sheldon, the promoter of ECPW, and be like, I'm going to talk about one guy specifically because he's absolutely amazing. And if you get a chance for some reason to book this gentleman on your show, it will be the greatest thing you ever see, bar none. Greatest promo in history, right? Greatest promo in professional wrestling right now, worldwide, WWE, I don't care. Charlie, as soon as he puts on some size, he's going places. His name's Charlie Hubley. And he'll come up to me and be like, are you going to Sheldon's show?
Sorry,
What?
is that the guy that's dating Madison now?
No, that's Charlie Winston.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
We have too many Charlies.
I guess so, because I was picturing the bald. Okay, I pictured a completely different human. Please send me links of this guy because I'm always. I will. And you know damn well that, like, and it's funny because I was just about to bring this up. Like, I mean, in the Maritimes, just New Scott's word is bond, and like, I mean, so much so that if New Scott ever messaged me and this has happened a couple of different times where he's just like, hey, so and so is coming down there. Cool, I got dates for them here, and here. And because if New Scott tells me that they're good, I will legit welcome them into my home, sight unseen, and I've done that before.
Charlie Hubley is that guy. He will be the hardest working guy on your show. I've spent 2 days in a car with him doing shows. Like, there was a huge show in Moncton at the Moncton Casino earlier this year, and me and 3 other people spent nearly 2 days in a car, no sleep, barely any food, traveling all over the place. Flip Gordon was there for a lot of it too. And Flip Gordon didn't complain once, to be honest. I mean, such a nice guy for what he had to go through for this show. But Charlie, not one complaint. Did everything asked. Like, I was like, I want to go to sleep. Fuck everybody. But anyway, the reason I still stay around is for guys like Charlie that don't know how to, don't necessarily want to ask or are too nervous to ask someone like Mike and Pete on what to do. They know I've been around. They know I'm one of the only people that work for everybody. There's still a thing where if you work for this person, you can't work for this person. I film for almost every promotion, or have filmed for almost every promotion in the Maritime. So,
and you've earned that respect, rightfully so.
Yeah, I'm always around these people, and then someone will ask, like, who's good now? And I'm like, Charlie or Casey or Tieran or whoever it may be. And then we'll give those guys a shot. They've given people a chance, just like you did with Crossbody, just based on me begging them to book. Like, ECPW, Sheldon's been running since 2003. And I run his Facebook page. I make all his videos. I do everything for the guy. So it's kind of like you. When I tell him somebody's good, he'll listen, but he won't necessarily book them right away. I've been trying for a year to get Charlie Hubley booked up in Cape Breton, to get him around Mike Hughes and Duke McIsaac, because he's never done a show with them. He's never met them. And I know as soon as he gets around them, as soon as Mike sees him in person, because I always put him over huge online, and people are like, that's just New Scott because he's their friend, right? But I know as soon as he gets around Mike and Mike sees him, he's going to be like, all right, kid, you're coming. Like, Red Rock Wrestling is like the big thing in the Maritimes, right?
Yeah.
That's Mike's promotion in PEI. Everybody wants to work there. I know Mike will be like, you're good. You're coming to my next show. Or at least they will start that conversation of like, here's how do I get to work for you type thing when they're in the same room. So I've been messaging Sheldon for a year. Please book Charlie. Please book Charlie. Every message I open that we have a conversation with, as soon as he messages me, doesn't matter what he asks. He's like, can you make this video? Please book Charlie. Yes, I can make this video. And finally, he agreed to book Charlie. Then the world ended. I'm like, hey, son of a bitch.
But that's progress, though.
Yeah, but Sheldon has a show on August 22nd, and the very first thing I said, was, "Are you rebooking Charlie for this show?" He's like, "Already done." I'm like, "Good." But that's what
You're
it's not.
good
It's
brother,
not
New
just
Scott.
Charlie. I
God
do
damn
it.
it.
What's that?
I said, you're a goddamn good brother. And
Oh,
fuck that.
and it's not just Charlie I do it for. He's just the one I chose to use for the story. I've gotten other people bookings with other people that run promotions. I'm like, Wild One Casey Williams. I'm like, he's really good to whoever. And I'm like, you should give him a shot. But there's also people that come up and I'm like, that ask me, they're like, can you put in a good word for Sheldon? I'm like, yeah, but I know they're not ready. So I will always tell them, you need to work on this. Like, I don't know what it is that they trust my judgment to be like, you need to improve in this area. I've never wrestled. I don't fucking know. But they trust me because I've watched it for so long, I guess. I've been around it for so long. I can pick out the good from the bad, and they will always ask. And then I will tell them, okay, you work on this, improve this, and then I'll put a good word into whoever for you type thing, right? Because there's some
you've
people
also
that
spent the
think
time
that,
in the you've also spent the time in the car with people explaining that
yeah,
stuff to you properly. So it's not like you're
yeah,
just coming out of left field with this info. Like, you're the guys that they're trying to get
yeah,
booked by are the guys that are explaining the business to you. So I mean, it's not like you don't know what the fuck you're talking
yeah.
about.
And I think to them, I'm like the happy medium, right? They know I'm not going to be like, you fucking suck. Go home, take your bags, never come back. Because that's been said to some people. But I'm never going to be that mean. I'm going to be like, here's what you need to work on. And the other side of it is, I know that they think they're ready and they think they're excited. But if you go up and work somebody and have a terrible match, you're going to feel bad. Mike Hughes or whoever is going to see it and be like, that kid doesn't have it, right? So I want you to be ready for that chance, right? I don't want you to embarrass yourself and feel bad and then come out and be like, I blew it. I've had people apologize to me for having a bad match. I'm like, you don't need to apologize to me. Just work on whatever it is that you need to fix and then come back next show and do it better. But I don't want them to be embarrassed in front of a large crowd, because a lot of the little shows around here, that's fine. You want to do the little show to get that ring work. And the other thing I tell them is, if you want to come to Sheldon's show, come. Help set up the ring. Help tear down the ring. If there's a small spot, maybe you'll get it. But show them that you're there putting in the work. Show them that you just drove 5 hours there and you're going to drive 5 hours home just to say hello, just to set up the ring, just to do whatever is asked of you type thing, right? Because that goes a long way with a lot of people, showing you putting in the effort to get booked. Other people are just like, I'm not booked, I'm not going. I drove everywhere forever, like for years, for no reason. Like, no reason, spending my own gas just to be able to do something.
I can give a classic example just really quickly. Is there's this kid down here who I've told this story a bunch of times. I think I've even mentioned it on the podcast once or twice. But like, there's this kid down here that I wanted to hate so badly, because he to me was just like this online troll. But like, when I started doing the showcase series shows for Crossbody, you know, I pretty much said, I'm like, if you show up, if you show up early and do the things that you're supposed to do, if you shake everybody's hand, you're respectful of all of the things, like you stay afterwards and you tear down, and like you do all the things that you're supposed to do, like that you've essentially discussed,
Right.
that like that you have gone through and done. I'm like, then I will use that person, because that's what these showcase series shows are for. It's to reward people that are doing the right things the right way. And there was this kid, his name is Andy, and he wrestles as Young Love, and I wanted to hate him, but he showed up show after show after show. And I think I even came up with an excuse one show to not use him, because I'm like, I fucking don't want to like this kid. And then he showed up the next week. And then at that point I looked around and I'm like, ugh, he's doing all of the fucking things that I said that if you do this, and this, that I'd be happy to use you. So I went to people that I knew that knew him, and I was just like, what are we doing here with this kid? And then the one guy was like, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to give him my thumbs up. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And then I went to somebody else, and then I'm like, what are we doing with this guy? You know him. He's just like, give him a shot, man. He fucking comes here every week and he works hard. And I'm like, that's all I needed to hear. Boom. And he's become not only a regular on the Showcase Series shows, but he's become like a somewhat regular on our main shows as well before the world fucking ended. And as you can vouch, because again, you and me don't really, when we vouch for somebody to one another, we mean it. And he was one of the guys that he was actually going out that way not too long ago before the fucking world ended. And I had even asked you, I was just like, hey, listen, I know that you're running this show. I know that traditionally you would probably look at this guy and be like, there's no fucking way I'm going to use this guy, but use him. He's worth it. He's like, he's young. He needs the experience. To me, he needed the experience of being able to wrestle on a maritime like show, getting in that locker room, just being able to be in front of that audience. I know that the locker room and the audience would probably look at him and be like, not sure. But I know that Andy's the kind of kid that could win everybody over. Sort of probably like the Charlie Hubley thing that you're just explaining before. But that all boils down to that hard work and showing up and doing all the right things that you were talking about that Andy did.
Yeah.
And, again, that started the story. I wanted to hate him. And next thing you know, I'm literally calling a very close personal friend of mine and recommending like, hey, if this kid's coming down to your area and he's worth a shot,
Yeah.
And you have to invest into guys like that. And, it's funny that I look back at it now. That's pretty much what you did for me is like, you just, you kind of did all the things that I needed to do, but just wasn't really 100% sure of. And that's kind of the gift that I get to do for a lot of the younger guys now is, a lot of them are I don't want to say misguided because I sound like I'm disrespecting their trainers, but maybe they just haven't been taught 100% the proper way of doing things. And it's not to say that I'm Mr. Perfect and Mr. Proper, but but my way has gotten me into some pretty cool opportunities and that I wouldn't have gotten into otherwise, that I had to learn the hard way to get to, you know what I mean? So I feel like if anybody has like advice to give, like I've definitely got good advice to give because mine isn't from, hey, I think that you should maybe avoid doing this because I've heard that this is the wrong. No, I've done a lot of shit the wrong way, and I've learned the hard way. And, you find out that just doing just hard work and just being respectful and being nice to people will get you, a lot further in life than.
No, it's true. And with when I promote shows, on the last show I promoted before the world ended, I gave 2 people their first match. 2 people that there was a show the next day that the promoter said they didn't have anything for them. But I was able to give these 2 kids their first match on a show, and both those matches are online. And they both knocked it out of the park. They haven't had a match since, obviously, but no one else was willing to give this guy and this girl a shot. But they were there. They were helping out. They were doing all the right things. One of them didn't even have gear, didn't even like expect to work. I'm like, do you want to get in there tonight? He's like, huh? I'm like, I'll put you with this guy. This guy doesn't have a ton of experience either, but it was another guy that I wanted to book, but I couldn't book because he had to work. Mm-hmm. Then he got the night off, showed up, and he's like, I'm here. I'm like, all right, we can work you in. So I put him with this guy, and he had a fantastic match for a first match. Jeff led Draven through a very basic but very good first match, and no one else was giving him the time of day. He used to come down. He lives in New Glasgow, which is about an hour and 20 minutes away from the city. He used to come to the training school, drive an hour and a half here and an hour and a half back every time the boys would go train. But no one was willing to give him a match. He showed up at my show. I'm like, you're getting in there tonight, kid. And he did. I'm like, what do you want to use for music? He's like, music? And he was trained by Lance Storm, right? That's where he came from.
Oh my God.
And so I gave,
I've had so many Lance Storm students come through
we have four
crossbody. It's
here right
insane.
now. We have
Yeah.
we have Charlie Hughley was trained by Lance Storm, and four other people. So I guess we have five that Lance Storm students here. But Draven didn't have music, so I'm like, I'll give you something. So I gave him Lance Storm's WCW theme just as a joke, right?
Yep.
And he comes out and he does this thing, has his match, and he couldn't have been more grateful. You know,
Yeah.
I'm happy to be able to do that for people that aren't willing to book other people for whatever reason, like they're too new, they're too green. Someone's got to give them experience. Like they've done everything the right way. You don't have to put them in the main event. Put them in like a pre-match show or a match that like it's not going to mean that much. Let them get that experience. You know, like somebody let me hold a video camera around a ring. If I can help somebody do something right now, that's what I'm going to do. You know.
I think that's why we get along so well. God damn it, because I'm in the same boat, man. Because as you know, like I had to work for everything that was given to me. Like nothing was given to me, as we've pretty much explained in this podcast. And like the fact that I'm able to provide opportunities for people that were in the same position I was, but to be able to do so in a way where it's like, okay, I can make sure that you didn't make the same mistakes that I did. Like I can make sure that you do this correctly. You know, it's such a cool spot to be in.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a bit of a thankless job, but it's really not the reason why I do it. To be perfectly honest with you, sometimes there's no thank you that will ever mean as much as just watching some of these young guys come back through the curtain after doing stuff that they just didn't think that maybe they were capable of, that you kind of guided them through a little earlier in the day, and they come back and you just see the pride on their face, and you just see like, oh my God, I didn't know that I could do that, but now I could, like, I believe it. Like you just, there's no amount of pride that you could ever, like, you just can't explain it. And like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, sometimes it's cool when people come up to you and they're like, hey man, thank you so much for all the things that you've done and like all the opportunities that you've provided and like the knowledge. But like, again, sometimes that's nice because that's not the reason why you do it. But like, just to see the impact that you have on people's lives, sometimes whether they actually know it or not is often, you know, the coolest thing that you could possibly be a part of, especially as far along as we are now, knowing what we know, because we're giving back. And I that's essentially what I got out of your answer, is that like you're sticking around, doing what you do to give back to the people that maybe didn't have the opportunity and the knowledge that, again, when we both first started down there, you know?
Yeah. And I've gotten like, I'll give an example. I've gotten mad at people for, I say mad, but it's not really mad, for doing the wrong thing, for like talking shit about a promoter who you may not like the promoter, but said promoter ran a ton of shows. If you want work, a lot of work, instead of working once a month, you should be contacting said promoter that you're trashing. And I took the three of them aside. I'm like, I get it. Trust me. I've been there. I agree with what you're saying, but you guys have a month in the business. You guys need to shut up and contact him for work. No joke. The next show, the guy that was doing the trash talking was on this person's show. I was like, I am so happy to see you here. You did the right thing. And he learned, just because I say something doesn't mean you get to say it too, right? I've been around somebody for 15 years. If they're doing something stupid, I can call them on it. You can't or shouldn't.
Yes.
Right? You should be asking for work, because it doesn't matter who it is, where it is. You're getting in the ring, having a match with somebody, getting that experience, right?
Yep.
And this guy took it to heart. Next show, was booked, had a match, and he worked for the guy every show since. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, buddy, I'm enjoying not going through with this whole format thing, just because this has been a really cool conversation so far. And the funny thing is like, I know that we're going to have to do another episode like this, just because like we have so many stories that we haven't even fucking scratched the surface on
I
yet.
know.
Um,
Tons.
but I do want to start wrapping this up, just because time wise, we're kind of getting into that area. But I got to ask you, I end every interview, and you're not even getting the rapid fire questions, because we're doing part 2. We'll get to them
Absolutely.
eventually. But I have to end every podcast with, because I've been doing all the questions asking over here. You know what I mean? So again, the reason why I started doing this podcast in the first place was to get to know my friends a little bit better than hopefully, I did going into it. Harder with you because I've known you for so goddamn long. But again, I put myself in the position to ask all the questions. So I want to switch roles here. And if you have a question for me, I'm just curious if you have anything that you want to know about me that we could talk about.
I've got 2 questions for you.
All right.
The first one is, what was the most difficult part for you when you started the training center and the promotion? Like, what was the hardest thing for you to be able to get it like up and running, to actually have the training center and actually start doing shows?
The hardest part for the training was probably just like any business. It was just getting people, just establishing your business, because, I was away for wrestling for so long. So when I came back, like, it was a very short time from when I took my mixed martial arts break to coming back to pro wrestling, that like I got back. I only did like a show or 2 before I had the school, because it was just kind of presented to me and it was offered to me in that time frame. It certainly wasn't even anything that I had planned. It was a opportunity that was presented to me by the owner of Fear the Fighter. Do you remember that clothing company?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, mixed martial arts brand. So like I knew him through working at the Adrenaline Training Center in London. So getting the school wasn't hard. It wasn't hard getting it started, but getting like students and getting the word out there was, because I had been away for pro wrestling for so long. So for people to try to trust my training was a little hard at first, I suppose.
Right.
But trying to get people to remember, it's like, yo, Notorious TID is the fucking man. Like, if you're coming, like, I get that, like, the school is kind of centered around, like, sort of centered around me in a weird way, but like, Tid is the guy. Like, I'm going to be running the training portion of it, but that's like the conditioning and all that stuff. And like, I've got a different idea of how I want to train pro wrestling based off of my mixed martial arts background.
Right.
But it's been a formula that's worked. It was just hard getting the people to kind of conform. That's a fucking shit word. But to you know what I mean? But like to kind of get used to it, and it's something that, like, especially with our earlier crew, like Tyler Thomas and Kobe Durst are 2 guys, and Holden Albright obviously are 3 guys that stick out huge out of our like first kind of like training class, because those 3, like Tyler Thomas kind of had to stop, but like he got some bad concussions and there's some health issues there. He basically only wrestles for crossbody now. But Kobe Durst is like a worldwide name right now, like he's killing it. And like, he came to us with training, like previous training, but we certainly helped clean him up, and we spent a lot of time on Kobe Durst. And Holden Albright is a guy that we pretty much got our hands on like real early. And, Holden is like I said, he actually was at the last podcast we did. Like, he's the closest thing that I've got to a son, because like, we were like, when the training class that he was a part of, like, shut down, like, I want to say a month afterwards. So like, he was kind of like lost trying to find a direction. And I was looking for like a student that I could invest in. And we just found one another. It was weird. And like, we were just, it's funny kind of looking back at it, that like, we, especially at that point in time in our lives, like, we really needed one another for because like I needed that student that like I could work on and be like, okay, like this is my system. You know what I mean? Like this is my beliefs. Like this is what I can do with a human being. Like especially when they put in the work. Like because like Albright was a fat, chunky old Sean Morgan when he first showed up at Crossbody. So I saw a lot of myself in him. You know, once we got like guys a little bit more established, it became a lot easier to bring in students. So that was definitely the hardest part for the training. And I'll certainly credit those guys with being able to kind of open those doors and getting other students to come in. As far as the promotion goes, the hardest part of that for sure was because there was already another promotion in Kitchener that was established, and they are a very old school, almost like an 80s maritime style company is the best way I could put it. But their focus, let's just say, and I mean this with no disrespect to them whatsoever, but it's not like their focus is on fitness and and hard work, you know? So when I wanted to start a company and start a promotion, I knew that, again, it was almost like kind of going back to the whole Kenny Omega thing. Like I knew that I wanted to create like I don't want to say strong style, but like I've told this story on a previous podcast, but like I was wrestling for that other company, and me and somebody else we went out there with the intentions of having like a real hard like wrestling match, and people were booing it, and they were like, "What the fuck is this garbage that you're doing?" And I'm like, "This is the best
That's
wrestling.
crazy.
This is insane to me.
Yeah.
We are working our fucking asses off, and like we are having like a really solid technical battle, and they don't even know what the fuck this is." That stuck with me, and that like hurt my heart, you know? So like I knew that when I started my own shit, I'm like, I have to retrain this fucking city to appreciate this. So it took a while. It took definitely like about a half of a year. And the guy that pretty much opened up those doors for us was Speedball Mike Bailey. And
he's so good. He's been out here a bunch. He's so good.
Yeah, like I did a podcast with Bailey not too long ago, and we told the story already. But like to kind of long story short, this like I met him at a random show in Toronto and I had a show the next day, and like I knew who he was, he didn't know who I was. But
Right.
like I asked him, I'm just like, hey, I don't know if you're around, but like I've got the show tomorrow. Like I don't know how much money I can give you, but like if you want to do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And he's just like, we made an arrangement with him and his two students. We figured something out. He wrestled his two students, and it was fucking so sweet. And then I asked him right away, I was like, when can you come back? And like we arranged a date, and then he did a triple threat match with my student Tyler, or with our student Tyler Thomas and Alessandro Del Bruno, who we mentioned previously in earlier on in the podcast. And that match is the match that will that match is like my baby in a weird way, even though I had absolutely zero to do with it as far as putting it together or any of that stuff. And why I say that is because like I wanted people to view our company as, again, that one thing that I explained to you. And those guys went out there and not only did it, but like made it acceptable. Like Bailey, holy shit. I don't know if you've ever seen the match, but like it's on our YouTube channel. And if
I'll check it out for sure. Yeah.
Bro, it's one of those matches where you have to go back and you have to watch it 2 times. You watch the match, and then you're just blown away. And then you go back and watch it the second time, watch the audience. It's magic in its purest form, because that audience had never seen anything like that before in like, and it was done so perfectly and so passionately that the audience, like that was so hell-bent against wanting to accept that, were just so blown away that they're just like, where has this fucking been all of our lives? And I'm just like, we did it.
Awesome.
Like we did it. Like, holy fuck, we did it. And ever since then, like it's been like I've been able to create, you know, and like in the way that I wanted to do from day one. And that was the hardest part, because from that point on, we were able to gain traction and build an audience. And like, I think that it got the word out there for fans that like, shit, like this is some place that you want to check out. Cause like I don't know what, but something's happening here. And then it became something that the boys could look at, and they were just like, yo, I don't know what the fuck this is, but something's happening here.
Right.
And thankfully, it turned into what I wanted it to be and more. And when I say that, it's like, man, I just wanted to show where our students could learn and get better with veterans who are good at working with younger guys and can teach them in the ring. But not only that, but having good people around, and that were like the most important things to me, you know. And as long as everybody could put that hard work, good people, and being able to work with everybody, you know, that was the goal for me. And we've surpassed that, man. Like I'm sure that every company, every promoter, every whoever has the story, they say the same thing. Like, man, like our crew is so tight. Like we're a tight knit family, blah, blah, blah. Like I've been around the game too goddamn long, man. Like I know what's real and what's not. And what we got
for sure.
what we got in our little fucking tiny ass gym in Kitchener, Ontario is authentic, and it's genuine, and it's real. And we've got leaders of all age brackets, which is just an insane thing to think about. Like when to guys like you and me, who are like, the leaders are supposed to be like the fucking vets, like, but in our locker room, like you've got the notorious TID, who, to tie this back into Peter, like me and Albright were just talking about this again last episode, but like Tid to us is like, he's not the father. He's the godfather. He's like the guy that like, he's not the guy. You don't worry about pissing Tid off. That is the least of your concern. What you're worried about is upsetting him and making him disappointed. Because then at that point, you're just like, oh my God, like I fucked up, man. Like if Tid's disappointed in you, or if Tid like gives you that, like, yo, you fucked up. I'm telling you, you fucked up, you know? So like, we've got him, we've got Marcus Custom Ryan, who used to work as a custom made man. Yeah. Who's legit. We call him Uncle Custom now, because he's everybody's uncle. Like he's like the crazy uncle that you go to in life, that you're just like, man, I need life advice, but at the same time, like I might need to go and drink beer and be stupid with somebody. Like, can you please be all of these people? Yeah. You know, like that's Uncle Custom. But then you've got other guys that maybe you wouldn't expect. Holden Albright is the fucking leader of that locker room. And like he leads by example, you know, like he is he's the hardest working guy on that fucking squad, man. Like he shows up, he's the first one to show up, he's the last one to leave. He's the guy that if anybody ever needs advice, like he's always there. Like if anybody needs advice for wrestling, life, like whatever, like Holden's just there for everybody. And he's become like everybody in the locker room's big brother. And again, as one of our students, it's like the most proudest fucking thing that you can like have. It's like you've got this guy that you've taught everything that or not everything, but like as much as you could possibly cram into one human being information wise for what they're capable of computing, you have put into their system. And they're taking all of that, and they're not only using it to become a better wrestler, but a better human being and a leader for people. And they're taking that and they're leading by, like, again, leading by example. It's just a long-winded answer, but like, God damn.
I get it though. You're right. It's
all that hard work really just turned into just like everything that I could have possibly dreamed of and more, you know?
That's awesome.
But that's what hard work does, man. You fucking continue to work hard, and at some point in time, like it eventually will pay off. Like there's this meme that I saw that got me through a really hard time one time, and it's like two different levels. There's like this guy who it's like they're digging bricks with like a pickaxe. And then there's like this one guy and he's just like, oh man, like I'm going to walk away because I'm just digging too much. And he's literally like this far away from hitting like the money that's on the other side of the bricks. And then there's this young guy up top and he's just like, I don't know what's there, but I'm just going to keep fucking digging because this is what I'm supposed to do. And like, that stuck with me. And that was the reason why things ended up happening for me, because I took that mentality once I saw that and like applied it. And I was, you know, like that led me to getting extra work with WWE. It led me to doing producing work with Impact and just all these other different things, and opened all these different doors. And it was just a mentality, you know?
Yeah.
But it's having those people around and having, again, like having that locker room and having those everybody like just hardworking, like-minded people around you is the most important thing that I could possibly stress to any young talent that's getting into this business right now. Because one thing that I can vouch for from experience is that the best wrestlers don't necessarily make the best human beings. And
boy, are you right.
when it comes to learning the game, you might think, I need to go learn from this best wrestler. And what ends up happening is that you find out very quickly it's a lot different than what you envisioned it, because that person isn't what you expected them to be.
Right. And that's super disappointing when that happens. I always heard the thing like, don't meet your heroes. I've been very lucky with almost everybody I met has been super nice. But then there's like the odd person that's not, and you're like, oh, but I really like that person.
It's hard, man. Like they say, don't meet your heroes, but like it's weird. Like to some of that degree is true, but like you know, to kind of like quick story this, just because again, I know I've already told it, but like my hero is Chris Jericho. You know, always has been, always will be. Like I mean, I was a Hulk Hogan guy, but like I skipped my first day of school the day before I trained my first day of wrestling training to go meet Chris Jericho, because I knew that they were at SmackDown in Toronto. And I went down there with the sole purpose of meeting Chris Jericho because I knew where they were driving into the building. And long story short, I saw everybody drive through. Stone Cold, Big Show, you fucking name it. They went through. Didn't see Jericho. I was about to give up, walk away. Next thing I know, as I'm walking away, me and Chris Jericho run into each other walking as we turn the corner into one another. And I was just like, whoa, holy shit, like Chris Jericho. And he's just like, yeah, what's up, man? And I'm like, I've been waiting hours just to literally ask you a question if I was able to. He's like, well, I'm right in front of you, man. What do you want to know? And I was like, oh fuck. I'm like, well, I'm about to start my wrestling training tomorrow. Like, and like, you're like one of the biggest reasons why I'm doing this. Like, what advice would you give me? And his advice to me was, and it was crazy how quickly he came up with this too. And how sincere it was. Cause like he looked me dead in the eye when he said this, and he's just like, don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't make it. I'm just a kid from Winnipeg. And a lot of people told me that I can't make it. And here you are trying to meet me. You know what I mean? Like don't
That's
let
awesome.
anybody tell you that you can't do this, because you can. Because if I can do it, you can do it. And don't ever forget that.
That's awesome.
And oddly, clearly it stuck with me, you know, because it might've took a while for it to sink in, but I mean, that's advice that I would give to anybody right now, you know?
That's awesome, man. That's fantastic. I thought you were going to go another direction. I thought you were going to say you was a prick or something when you were saying don't meet your heroes, but that's fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah, like that's the thing is like, I mean, like I've got, actually, you know what? I really don't. I don't have too many stories of like people that I admired where I was just like, ah, fuck that guy. Like, I feel like thankfully I've admired the right people.
Yeah, I don't have very many, but I have a couple. Not even people that I have admired, but people that are like, oh, sweet, this guy's coming in. He'll be cool to meet. And then he ends up like being a dick. Like I have a really good story that we can tell on the next podcast if you want, that I haven't told on. I don't think I may have like mentioned it online or something, but I've never told the entire story on like a video or a podcast. It's pretty funny now, but at the time it was pretty ridiculous. But so we can save that one for part 2. But
Okay, I will take you up on that,
because it's a very long story. But my second question,
okay,
is more of a request than a question. Tell everybody the Dairy Queen story.
So when so as we discussed, I had moved down to Nova Scotia when I was younger for a couple months. I was living down there with Jerry Martel and his lovely wife Wendy, and New Scott and I became real tight. Like, he was my boy down there. I didn't really know too many other people, especially because he lived down the street. I was really bummed out once the Real Action Wrestling thing happened, because I was like, holy shit, I'm about to make a living off of wrestling, and then it didn't happen. So I was like, I need to find a job. So I was looking, I took any shit job that I could possibly get my hands on. And then one of those jobs was I got hired at Dairy Queen in Halifax or Dartmouth. I don't even fucking remember at this point. So I start working there, and I want everybody to remember that I'm like a 16, 17-year-old kid. Okay. I'm stupid. I'm fat. I have no game. I don't deal with human beings. I'm not good at life. Okay. This lovely young woman decided that she wanted to take some interest in your boy Big Ben. And I'm like nervous as shit, right? And I'm just like, okay, like I don't know what to do, because like she invited me to her apartment after work one day, and I'm just like, fuck. So I think I even called New Scott, and I'm like, I don't know what to do, blah 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 blah. And he's like, dude, just be yourself, just chill, like you'll be fine.
Life coach there for a while.
Yeah, like he was really trying to coach me through this one. Because again, like I'm never a ladies' man. So he's trying to coach me through it. I go to this girl's apartment, and again, like when we were at work, like she seemed like a really nice young lady. Okay. So we go for I go to her apartment, we're hanging out, we go for a walk. We go to some bench, and I think I even asked, I was just like, am I supposed to kiss you right now? Like, because I was that stupid and I didn't even know. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, I even asked, and then she was just like, she just was really nice about it at first. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, no problem. And the next thing I know, I think she just randomly kissed me. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't expect that. And then she stopped kissing me, and then she shoved me, and then proceeded to yell at, I think, me, herself, and about 30 other people that I had no clue who were even there. And it was the fucking scariest goddamn moment in my entire fucking life up to that point. So I'm like, there wasn't like texting at this point. Like there was like, because texting on the cell phones when I had them back in the day with New Scott would have been like H, E. Like there's no discrete texting. It didn't exist. So I had to like get through this, and I didn't drive. Like I didn't have a vehicle. I don't even remember how the fuck I got out of it, but I just was like, okay, I got to take this girl back to her apartment. I got to like politely get out of here, and then I got to figure out what the fuck I'm going to do with my next life, because that job ain't happening anymore. So I get to her apartment. Hey, thank you so much. Like, this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate this. And then the same thing. She just kisses me. And then I'm like, are you okay? Shoves me, like, fucking boom. And then like, what the? And like, it was the most insane thing. And like, And to this day, like, I'm still trying to figure out what that might be. Cause like, I mean, thankfully, like when you get older, you have like perspective and stuff like that. Right. But like, we're both teenagers, and I just remember that happening. And then I think, if I remember correctly, I think this is what happened. I called you because I couldn't get a hold of Jerry Martell. And I think I even called you, and I'm like, I need you to pick me up, and I need you to save me. And I think that you actually did. I think you came and picked me up from the girl's apartment. Yeah, that's what it was. You picked me up and saved me. And then, because I think even on the phone, I'm like, hey, I need you to come get me. I'm here. I'll meet you. I think I even like, I'll meet you at like a Sobeys or something like that or whatever. And I'm like, just please, you have to do this. And then you came and picked me up, and you're like, why? And I'm like, I'll tell you when you get here. And then that car ride, I was explaining what happened to you. And I have never seen a man laugh at my shortcomings so goddamn much as you did at that point in time. Cause fuck, that was the scariest thing I'd ever been a part of at that point in time in my life.
It's a great story.
Oh my Lord. That was a time in my life that was a bit of a rough go, New Scott.
And I was there for every step of it.
You've been there for every goddamn step of it. It's crazy. Like, I mean, you and maybe my buddy Brady have literally been there for like the entire thing, you know what I mean? And have seen the growth from that to whatever it is I am now.
Completely different human being, man. Completely different. It's incredible. It's so nice to see.
Well, I'm definitely doing my best, and it's cool that the people that I looked up to and that I always wanted to make proud when I was younger are people that I'm still like in contact with to this day, and that I get to like be friends with, and that I'm, you know, the one thing I think I'll always be a little bit bummed about though is that, as silly as this sounds, like the people that I've got respect from like, you know, like that class, I guess you could say, is I think I earned the respect as a man. I still don't think to this day I ever earned the respect in the ring. And that's something that bothers me to this day, because I never really got to go back out and show what I could do, and like show my growth, and like, and even get out there and work with a lot of those guys. Right. So
still time. There's still time.
There is still time. Like, I've kind of put a bit of a time clock on myself, where I'm giving myself like about another year, like once we come back, before I start to just completely focus on promoting and producing shows full time, because I certainly don't think that my avenue for producing is going to take me to where it was at one point, but it's something that I just really enjoy doing, and something that I love. So I certainly want to provide more time, or spend more time doing that. But I also want to get out there and do the things that I just feel that I've always needed to do. And hopefully it'll bring me back out there, you know, even if it's for a show, for a weekend, for a week, whatever, you know. But like, that's definitely bucket list, is I want to get back out there, and like, I want to not just wrestle in front of you, but like, I want to get in there in the ring with like the Mike Hugheses and the Peter Smiths, and show them like, yo, like, not only can I go, but like, go ahead and test me, because I'll go you right back. You know what I mean? Like, I've grown up, and I want to show that to them, you know, and to you as well, because footage can only do so much.
We'll get you back out here at some point for sure.
Well, I appreciate that, and hopefully that becomes a thing. Now, I do want to start wrapping this up. Now, to wrap this up, everybody, you can find the show on Twitter and Instagram at Big Ben AF Podcast, as well as on Facebook under Big Ben and Friends Podcast. But one thing I have to stress to everybody right now, because I've seen my messenger is kind of loaded at this point. I'm not on Facebook right now. Like, yes, my Facebook is active, but I'm essentially as off Facebook as you could possibly be without being off Facebook. It's not even on my phone. I've got Messenger on my phone, and it's literally active, so that way I can do this. And I'll be on Facebook to share this kind of stuff and crossbody related stuff, because just sometimes you need a break from that kind of jazz, and I do right now, and it's been helping tremendously. But please go and support all those those pages. You can find us on YouTube by searching the show name, Big Ben and Friends Podcast, because we don't have enough subscribers yet to have an actual channel name. So if you could go subscribe, that would be lovely. You need 100. I think we're only at 65 at the moment. And it's kind of a rib right now. It's a rib right now, buddy. Like if you actually search Big Ben and Friends Podcast, the bar says Big Ben and no friends. So I'm trying to yeah, so I'm trying to avoid that little kick in the balls every time that you go and search it. So if you could subscribe, that would be great. You can also find the audio version of this show on Anchor, which nobody ever uses, but thankfully they distribute my show to Spotify and iTunes for me, so then that way you can search on those platforms and pretty much every other platform that you can find the show. You can find me personally on all my social medias at Big Ben is Angry on Twitter and on Instagram, at least at the moment. Because, again, not using my Facebook, so don't even bother. You can find Crossbody Pro Wrestling and the Crossbody Pro Wrestling Academy socials all in the same place at CBPW Academy. There's no sense in having multiple stuff for that. We all do it off the same one. You can subscribe to the CBPW YouTube page, where there is a ton of amazing content, such as the triple threat match that we were talking about earlier, and every single showcase show that we have ever produced. www.youtube.com/Crossbody Pro Wrestling Academy, all one word. You can also find us on independentwrestling.tv. All of our latest shows, full shows with commentary, the whole shebang. You can use the code Crossbody to get 5 free days. I couldn't recommend going to watch those shows enough. There are some amazing shows. The Family Feud 4 show, which was our last one that we did, is by far the best show that we've ever produced. Go out of your way to watch it. And last but not least, you can support CBPW and all of our amazing wrestlers and our staff by heading to prowrestlingtees.com/Crossbody Pro Wrestling, where all of the proceeds of these shirt sales get split between the wrestler and our incredibly hardworking production staff. We also have the shirts that we are keeping on there, the Black Lives Matter shirts that we have, the Madman Fulton shirt that we have produced, Justin Sane shirt that we have produced, as well as the Crossbody Pro Wrestling logo shirts and the Showcase Series shows. 100% of those proceeds are going to blacklivesmatter.ca. It's something that we started for last month, where we donated 100% of our proceeds, which ended up being $260. But we are going to continue to donate the proceeds from those shirt sales to that cause on a monthly basis, which is a cause that our black athletes on our roster have gotten together and decided that that's where they wanted to allocate those funds. So we want to help and support in the proper way, you know? So you can find New Scott on everything social media at New Scott. You can find him at newscott.com. You can find him at any maritime wrestling show that's ever been produced ever. I don't even know. You got any final comments, brother?
No, that's it. Everything of mine is at New Scott, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And the only other thing is
your YouTube page.
It's newscott.com.
Perfect.
And the only other thing is Pro Wrestling Unleashed is facebook.com/Pro Wrestling Unleashed.
And that is your company.
We started up. Yeah, we started it up this year, had a bunch of shows planned, and the world ended. But once we get back, we actually had a meeting last week. I can't say a lot about it, but we had a meeting last week, and we have something really, really big planned. If things keep going with the way the world's reopening, if things keep going in this direction, we have something very, very exciting planned. It'll be
It's me. It's me.
It will be a first for wrestling in Nova Scotia, probably Atlantic, Canada.
That's fucking great, man. I hope that happens for you, because you are a hardworking son of a bitch, and you deserve all of the fucking good things. You deserve all the cookies. You deserve every fucking good thing that happened to you, brother. I can't wait to do this again. Honestly, like I can't wait to have a second episode. I think we're probably at 2 hours here. Couldn't care less, because we could do this for so much longer. But thank you very much for being a guest on episode 8. I really appreciate you doing this. Go check out New Scott on all of his socials. Go follow him. Go follow his and subscribe to his YouTube channel. I can't thank you everybody enough for tuning in this week to this week's episode. We will be having episode 9 dropping here shortly after this, hopefully, and we will see you all again then. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much. And I can't wait for part 2.
Hell yeah, man. Thanks again, brother.
Have a good one. Thank you.